Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto becomes youngest Jonin part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. October 10th, Konoha. Why can't I come, Dad? The Yondaime Hokage of Konoha hid his face in his hands, already feeling the incoming migraine resulting from the constant shouting of his 7-year-old son. He just knew that Naruto would react the same way his mother had. They acted so much the same that it was frightening. When he tried to explain that, like his wife's former pregnancy, the location of where she would give birth would have to be in secret, Naruto adamantly expressed his disapproval, meaning that even though he had promised the boy, the situation was too dire for him to come. When he had explained the situation to his wife, she violently objected in true Kushina fashion. He still had a sore jaw from where her fist had planted itself on his face. When it seemed that the young boy was just about to let loose another head-pounding shout, Minato quickly interjected, holding up a hand. He could understand that Naruto was upset, but the event taking place was to be held in the utmost secrecy. "I'm sorry, Naruto, but my hands are tied in the matter. When she gave birth to Naruto, the location had to be classified. With the seal weakening during childbirth, the delivery has to be in secret, outside of the village. It would be too risky to allow you to come." The young boy gave him a look that made his heart clench. He honestly wanted Naruto to be there, to welcome his new sibling to world with a smile, but he had to stand firm by his convictions. And if that meant the shame of betraying his son's trust, then so be it. Naruto meanwhile couldn't believe what he was hearing. Here he was enjoying the best day of his life. He had woken up to a birthday surprise of hugs and kisses from his parents. His father had given him the first ever trichonai used for his Hiraishin no Jutsu. He couldn't stop shaking from the moment it had been placed into his small hands. His biggest surprise was from his mother. She had given him an all-black shakudo engraved with the symbols of her deceased village Yuzushi-Ogakure. Kenjutsu had been a huge part of her village, and although Kushina wasn't very good at it, she wanted Naruto to become a master. And to top it off, ramen was for breakfast. He couldn't keep the smile off his face as he walked to the academy that day. Adding sweetening to the cake, he and his best friend, Itachi, became the youngest students to graduate the academy since Ataki Kakashi only at the tender age of 7. And the graduates of this year were giving 1 week of holiday for the astounding talent that was present in their generation. How could this day get any worse? Speak of the devil, for as soon as he came sprinting home to brag to his father of his success, his perfect day got worse. A whole lot worse. His father had promised him before that he would be allowed to be there when his mom would be giving birth. He had told him that all 3 of them would welcome his baby sister. He always wanted a little sister when she came into the world. So why couldn't he be there? But Dad. Minato felt his heart clench at the unshed tears in his eyes. "That's not fair, you promised." "You promised." Minato actually flinched at that. If there was one thing he always hoped Naruto stayed truthful to, it was his word. Promises made should be promises kept. And here he was going against his own words. He could only give Naruto a silent shake of his head. "I'm sorry, Naruto. But my word is final." The firm tone of his voice left no room for argument. His broken expression turned to one of fury before the young boy snarled in anger. "Oh, I see. The harsh truth finally reveals itself. This is not about promises. This is about the damn village. It's always been about Konoha. But of course there is no comparison because I'll always be nothing more than second best." The young boy screamed himself hoarse, his breathing harsh from the exertion. Naruto knew he was treading on thin ice, but he ignored his consciousness currently screaming at him to shut his mouth. "It's all the village this or the village that. I hate this fucking ville." Slap! The sound echoed through the suddenly silent apartment. Naruto's blue eyes were wide open in shock, as his hand numbly rested on his face, nursing at the area that had turned red from the sudden blow. His father had slapped him. His father had never hit him before. Ever. The only time he ever got a spanking was for painting his mother's favorite blouse orange. Even then, it was just a slap on the wrist. Glancing into his father's icy blue eyes, seeing his face blank of emotion, he realized the man he had come to call father wasn't in front of him anymore. This was the 4th Hokage. The yellow flash who had decimated thousands in the blink of an eye. Shamed, he ducked his head in embarrassment. "De Hokage-sama? I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Don't you ever let me hear you curse the name of the leaf ever again." The tone was more of command than a statement. Naruto fervently nodded his head. "Forgive me, Hoka." Am I clear? There was a flicker of motion and Minato was suddenly in front of him staring him down. Naruto squashed the feeling of trying to gain distance between them and make a run for it. He could never run from his father even if he tried. The seal on his back made sure of that. Naruto's gaze found his feet and he whispered a quick answer. Yes. I said, am I clear? Minato repeated. Naruto still before he slowly lifted his tear-filled gaze, straining his neck to meet his father's eyes. Yes, sir. Father and son stared silently at each other. Naruto's shoulders shook as he desperately tried to stem the tears flowing from his eyes. His attempts failed as low sniffles were heard and soon enough his light cries echoed in the silent apartment. Minato stood there watching his son cry in front of him, and his icy gaze slowly melted from the boy's heartfelt sorrow. Sometimes he would forget that Naruto was only 7. A child. A boy desperately trying to please his father. Feeling the need to step out of the overwhelming shadow of his father by becoming a shinobi at such young age. But for now, Naruto was just a child crying for his father. And for now, he wasn't the 4th Hokage. He was Minato Namikaze. His son needed comfort. Minato silently lowered himself to one knee, slowly wrapping his arms around the crying boy and holding him in a tight embrace. I'm sorry, Dad. Naruto's quiet cries began to glow in length as he wrapped his tiny arms around his father and unleashed the full weight of all his bottle emotions. Minato felt it all. Anger. Guilt. Sadness. Sighed painfully as he ran his fingers through the boy's long golden hair, absently stroking his long ponytail and ushering gentle hushes. It wasn't long before Naruto's cries quieted down and Minato felt him use his shirt as a miniature tissue. Not that he minded. Finished with wiping his eyes on his shirt, Naruto rested his lightly on his father's shoulder, gently squeezing his shirt with his small hands. He closed his eyes and listened to his father's calm heartbeat, enjoying these few precious moments of them actually getting to be father and son. Naruto felt his father's arms tighten around him in response, as if he was savoring this moment as much he was. Minato turned his head and Naruto felt his warm breath lightly tickling his forehead. They stayed like this for a few quiet moments. So Minato began. Sniff. How was school? Done. We graduated, remember? Itachi and I are at the top of the class. Yes, I remember. I was just referring to how was the last day. Good, actually. Minato waited for him to elaborate but didn't receive an answer. That's it? Yep. Nothing new? Nope. Everything was just ordinary. Naruto suddenly scowled. One thing will never change is those girls that keep stalking us at school. Minato had to stuff his face into Naruto's hair to muffle his laugh. Geez, I tell you, Dad, they all act so weird. They just huddle together and point and giggle at us while whispering secrets. Naruto felt the grin in his hair. By us, I guess you're referring to yourself and Itachi-kun. Yeah, sometimes it gets so bad we have to hide at recess. This time Minato did laugh. Any girl in particular stand out? Naruto shifted to regard his father strangely. Huh? Minato rolled his eyes before he slowly shook his head and gently placed Naruto's head back against his shoulder. You know, for being a so-called genius, you're pretty dense. His face took on a miserable look. You remind me of your mother every day. Naruto ignored him before slightly perking up. Wait, were you referring to girls who act tough? Because there is this one girl called Hannah who tries to bully me. But even though I kick her ass, she still picks on me. Why does she continue when she knows she'll lose? Minato smiled cheekily. Sounds like you have a crush. A crush? Is that a taijutsu technique? Sigh. No. It's what you label when someone has a person they are affectionate for. Oh. So do you have a crush on Mom? Minato couldn't help but laugh. No, what your mother and I share is more than just a crush. It's something special. And that is? That is a secret. So what you have between you and Mom is a secret. Nice. Minato sighed. You'll understand when you're older. Whatever. His eyes suddenly went wide. Wait, so Hannah is affectionate for me. Is that why she bullies me? Minato grinned. Yep. Huh. No wonder Kakashi and I says girls like her, like it rough. Kakashi said what? Nothing. Naruto added quickly, noticing strong hands tighten around his small body. Minato sked. That damn boy and his books. Worst mistake I ever made was introducing him to Jiraiya. Pervy sage? What does he have to do with Kakashi and I? Don't worry about it. And it's Jiraiya Kufa. Mommy calls him that all the time though. Well, mommy has a potty mouth. Naruto lifted his head to give Minato a dull look. Minato stared back, holding his gaze steady, but soon his visage grinned and Naruto mirrored his actions, and soon enough their hearty laughter filled the room. Naruto was the first to recover his humor, slowly smiling to himself, watching fondly as his dad laughed. He looked so carefree, so at ease. Nothing like the cold visage he was used to or the icy stare. He even looked relieved. Almost as if this moment eased the tension of a highly stressful day. Naruto slowly extended his small hand and wrapped his fingers around one of his father's long golden bangs. Minato regarded Naruto fondly. What? Naruto's small smile slowly left his face. Am I more important to you than the village dad? Minato's eyes rose above his hairline at the question, honestly stumped. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. He lost his shocked expression and regarded Naruto with a critical look, seeing he was completely serious. He would admit the nature of the question took him by surprise. Their little moment of bonding had been going so well, and out of nowhere Naruto had to ask him something like this. Deep down Minato suspected he already knew the answer. Sighing to himself, he schooled his face of any emotion and began, Naruto, you know that. Minato was interrupted by the sound of a loud crash, and he quickly turned to the front door, just in time to see it crash open to reveal a very pregnant and very angry Kushina. The object of nightmares to any poor soul stupid enough to get on her bad side, Kushina stood in the front of the ruined doorway, her hair swaying like menacing nine tails of fury as she bared her teeth, steam forming from her breath with every pant. Minato. Both father and son screamed at the sight, their blonde hair sticking out on end, and their eyes wide circles. She slowly moved towards the pair, each step she took rattling the apartment like a mini earthquake. Kushina-chan, Minato ushered, failing to keep the fear out of his voice. Beside him Naruto was hiding behind his legs, shaking like a leaf. Why aren't you at the hospital? Shut up. Minato did just that, quickly snapping his mouth shut, quivering badly under her intense glare. She took another step forward and the pair quickly took a step back. This continued until their backs hit a wall, effectively blocking them of any exit. She continued ascending on them like a hungry predator, the glow of her eyes growing more and more intense with each passing step. Minato began to sweat bullets, wondering just what the hell had he done to piss his wife off. Beside him he heard Naruto whimper, as the angry woman was close enough for them to feel the heat emitting from her mouth. Minato thought quickly, remembering today's events, trying to recall where he could have gone wrong in this day. Let's see, we woke up. Celebrated Naruto's birthday. Sent him to school, had sex after. Pregnant sex was so hot. Stayed in bed for a while, then had more sex. Minato pulled on his bangs in desperation. Fuck, I didn't do anything wrong. I walked her to the hospital, sent her flowers, washed the clothes, did the dishes, practiced the seal, made sure to pick her up. His eyes widened in realization. The whole situation with Naruto had made him forget to go pick her up from the hospital. Trying to calm the situation, he ushered his apology. Kushina-chan, I'm sorry. He finished just in time as she lunged for the duo. Minato grabbed Naruto and held him close, waiting with a bated breath for the inevitable blow. 10 seconds passed, and the only sound he heard was that of his own breathing. Cracking open an eye, daring to take a peek, he saw himself in an empty apartment. Opening both eyes now and slowly easing his grip on Naruto, he looked around and saw Kushina was nowhere to be found. Still tense, and keeping an eye on the empty apartment, he lowered himself to whisper in Naruto's ear. "PSS Naruto, you can open your eyes now. I think she disappeared." When he got no response, he whispered again. "No need to be afraid, son, he trailed off, finally glancing at the young boy and seeing the reason why he was unresponsive. He was dangling in his arms, his little mouth hanging open and his eyes closed. The young boy had passed out in fright. Minato would have giggled if he wasn't so afraid right now. Lightly slapping his face, he shook the young boy awake. "Yo, Naruto, wake up." It took a few tries before Naruto began to shift and come to in his arms. "Wah, what?" Dad, his responses were throaty, and it took a few seconds for him to open his eyes and become fully conscious. "What happened?" Minato glanced around the apartment, still seeing no sign of Kushina. "You passed out." The now awake Naruto snapped his attention to his father. "I did. What the heck, all I remember was Mom charging." He trailed off, his eyes wide as saucers. "Oh no. Mom, he grabbed onto the back of his father's sleeve, trembling with fear. Where is she, Dad? Minato mirrored his actions. I don't know, son. I don't know. The pair stood in fearful silence looking around the apartment, with bated breath. Then they heard it. Boo! The sound came from behind. Minato yelped, jumping so high that his head impacted off the ceiling and he collapsed in a heap on the floor, knocked out cold. Young Naruto had been saying quiet prayer, only grabbed his small chest before going stiff as a rock and dropped lifelessly to the floor beside his father. Behind them stood Kushina, her visage of rage replaced by a cool glance as she absently stroked her large stomach. She smirked at the pair before she turned her attention to a window. Did you get all of that? In from the window emerged a figure looked to be dressed in traditional Anbu attire minus the mask. In his hand held a camera that had been recording the entirety of the events that just took place. Stopping the recording, Kakashi wiped away his tears, the results of his silent laughter, as he had permanently sealed what had transpired into his memory with his Sharingan. Kushina-sama, that was beautiful. He tucked the camera under his arm and gave some slow claps for emphasis. Kushina held her green dress and did a little curtsy in appreciation. You're welcome, my dear. Kakashi only smiled in response before he glanced at the unconscious pair. Should we wake them? The redhead walked towards him, taking the camera from him, and aimed the lenses at their downed form. Yeah, after some embarrassing pictures. Kakashi could only chuckle. I can't believe it was all a prank, grumbled Minato as he gently lay ice on the swelling bump on his head. He fixed an icy glare at the smiling pair. You two should be ashamed of yourselves. They all sat around the kitchen table silently dealing with the aftermath of their cruel prank. Kakashi only giggled and Kushina stuck out her tongue at him. In her lap was Naruto, absently stroking her beautiful long red hair. She turned her light blue eyes on him. You're not mad at me, are you, Naruto-kun? Naruto's expression mirrored his father's, but under her beautiful gaze his expression slowly melted and blush stained his face. No. She rewarded him with a brilliant smile, and to his embarrassment, and Minato's secret jealousy, gave him a quick kiss that left his face as red as her hair. She hugged him tight, gently stroking his long blonde locks. Meeting Minato's pouting face, she blew him a kiss over the top of Naruto's head and giggled when his face colored. Minato scowled, though his face stayed red. He schooled his expression before his eyes shifted to Kakashi, then back to her. Did Kakashi pick you up? Kushina nodded in response before turning her attention to the young Anbu in training. Kakashi-kun was such a gentleman. The young Anbu gave her a nice smile before he returned his attention to Ika seduction. Speaking of Kakashi, Naruto perked up in his mother's lap. Yo, Kakashi and I, are you forgetting what day it is? Kakashi didn't lift his gaze from his books. Unless I somehow magically jumped through time, it should be October the 10th. Naruto stared for a moment before he shook his head. Yes, and isn't this day special to a certain someone? He supplied. I don't think so. Only special day in October is Halloween, right? Naruto looked between his mom, whose faces were highly amused. He heard his mom try but failed to hold in her giggles. He scowled before his eyes narrowed threateningly. You sure you're not forgetting something? Kakashi finally lifted his gaze from his book and his eye formed a thin line as his hand scratched his chin in thought. After about a minute of him mumbling to himself about what was so special about today, he snapped his fingers in remembrance. Oh yes! I can't believe I almost forgot. He began to rummage through his utility pouch. Silly me. Naruto smiled and let out the breath he didn't know he had been holding. He didn't notice his parents share a look, no doubt knowing what Kakashi was planning. When Kakashi announced the mysterious item with the found in Naruto, he began to shake in excitement, absently bouncing up and down on his mother's lap. His excitement all but vanished as Kakashi pulled out a familiar green book. Now I remember what day it is. His eye smile returning. It's the 5th anniversary of Ika. If the silence wasn't bad enough, it was the way Minato had to bite his hand to keep from laughing and the way Kushina's silent laughter shook Naruto's still form. Naruto would have leaped across the table and pelted the Anbu across the face if it wasn't for the exceptionally strong grip his mother held him in. Despite his struggles, her grip didn't budge. Let me go, Mom. I just want to punch his face in. He tried to channel his already impressive chakra to his muscles, but her arms didn't even move. Damn it, why are moms so strong? So that we can discipline our children. Kushina whispered in his ear. Calm down, tiger. Naruto continued his futile struggles, his legs frantically flaring for a few more moments before he tired himself out. Kakashi laughed at Naruto's misfortune before he decided to end the teasing. Before young Naruto could blink, a small gift box slid across the table and lightly bumped into his panting form. Anger immediately replaced by excitement, his small hands instantly tore the box apart, and he stared starry-eyed at the material in his hands. A sleeveless, form-fitting black shirt, with a familiar face covering top at the neck. A face mask. Minato and Kushina both shared a smile as Naruto shed his blue t-shirt and put on his new attire. Finishing, he struck a pose. "How do I look?" "Oh my, so handsome," Kushina gushed. She tugged on his masked cheeks. "You look so cool, Naruto-kun." Minato grinned, offering him a small smile. "You put Kakashi to shame, that's for sure." The man in question didn't reply, only staring silently at Naruto with distant eyes. With their similar hairstyles, he almost looked. He shook his head, instantly banishing the thoughts. Offering Naruto a thumbs up, he gave him a lazy eye. Instant chick magnet. Naruto lavished the attention, giving a big grin under his mask, before he put on his previous t-shirt. Content that this day was now perfect, he leaned on his mother, enjoying the way her soft hands ran through his hair. They all enjoyed the quiet silence for a few moments, before Kushina turned to Kakashi. "So tell me, Kakashi, why do you want to join Umbu?" Rolling his lone eye at her mother hen nature, he made a sound at the back of the throat that Kushina took for a groan. "Ma, no need to worry, Kushina-sama. Besides, they came to me." Kushina prodded nonetheless. "But why Umbu? Why can't you stay satisfied as a Jonin? Heck, you could even become a sensei." This time, Kakashi scoffed. "Me? A sensei? Not happening. Kids." He hated kids. Except for Naruto, he was cool. "Why?" Kushina demanded, ignoring the way Minato sighed. Kakashi held up 3 fingers. "1. Because I want to. 2. They offered me the position. 3. Lord Hokage approves." He finished ticking off his last digit. Kushina turned her glare to Minato, causing the young Hokage to scratch his head in embarrassment. "You're not joining Umbu," Kushina stated. "And why can't I, Kushina-sama?" Because I said so, that's why." "Ma, if I listened to every word you said, I would have jumped off the Hokage mountain long ago, screaming all the way down." He sighed. "Sensei, I envy your strength." When Kushina's face turned red, Minato tried to disarm the situation. "Okay, settle down, you two. No need to." "Shut up, Minato." "Yes, dear." When Kushina fixed Kakashi with the look, Minato knew she was serious. "Now you listen here, buddy. I know I may nag a lot and worry. But if I didn't love you, I wouldn't care that a boy no older than 17 is joining a highly dangerous and classified Black Ops group." Kakashi loved the woman like a mother. But the choice was his and his alone. "I understand your concern, Kushina-sama. I really do, but I'm an adult, and I can make my own choices." He shifted slightly. "Besides, I told you not to worry, Kushina-sama. It's bad for the baby." He winked. Kushina scowled, but she calmed herself down. "Smartass," she whispered. "Sorry, did you say something?" The redhead narrowed her gaze and held up her fist at him in a threatening manner. "Watch it, copycat, or else." "It's copycat." Kakashi corrected, his attention fixated on Aika. "Whatever," she huffed. "I used to change your diapers. So don't start that hip attitude with me, Scarecrow." Used to her ever-fluctuating personality, Kakashi remained cool as cucumber. "My apologies, Kushina-sama. You don't know how grateful I am to you for cleaning my ass when I was but an innocent toddler." He flipped a page in his book. "I'll turn down the hip as you say it, when I'm around you." Kushina crossed her arms across Naruto. "You better, or else I'll have to put you over my knee like I used to give and that pale backside of yours a good spanking." Minato choked on the water that he had been drinking. Naruto stared at his mother in awe. Kakashi flipped another page. "Wouldn't want that now. Your pinches were bad enough." Kushina smiled triumphantly, absently remembering chasing down a young Kakashi. "Ha, those were the days. You used to be so cute back then." She shook her head at him. "Now look at you. I wouldn't even want to put my hand anywhere near your backside for fear of where it might have been." A lazy eye met her violet once. Ouch. She stuck her tongue out at him. His gaze shifted to Minato, and the fourth gulped at the twinkle in his eye. But it was already too late to stop the young Jonin. "Funny you're making fun of my ass right about now. I bet I know where yours has been, Kushina-sama." He smirked at her blushing scowl before turning his eye to Minato. "Sensei, you should hear your wife talk to Lady Mikoto sometimes, the conversation those women have." He turned his attention to ceiling, absently scratching his chin. Always a hot topic would be whose husband has the best tongue. Now, from what I hear, Fugaku-sama is very good with his, but by the situations as Kushina-sama explains, it would seem that your tongue is very, very fast at what it does. And I must say, sensei, even Lady Mikoto is jealous. He returned his attention back to his book. Wish my wife would boast about my speed. Well, if I ever had one, that is. Silence. Naruto, who had sat quietly through the whole conversation, was staring in confusion at the three adults. Wait, I'm confused. Where has mommy's bum been? And what about dad's tongue? He was ignored. Minato's slack-jawed, red face left Kakashi's, and he turned his wide blue eyes to his wife, whose face was as red as her fair. Kushina's mouth opened and closed several times before she stuttered a response. Why you pervert? Kakashi I smiled. Takes one to know one, Kushina-sama. He finished exuberantly. Minato sighed painfully, palming his face, as he watched Kushina try to stutter excuses and Kakashi just grinning her and firing back words that made her face flame. Poor Naruto just stared between the two in confusion. His attention was roused as Kushina suddenly froze. Naruto jumped slightly. Hey, I felt her kick. Knowing that his sibling would be a she, but knowing her name, Naruto had been constantly resting against his mother's stomach any chance he could get. Feeling kicks always made his joy soar. Mommy, she's moving. Yes, she is, Naruto. Kushina strained a smile. But I'm afraid you're going to have to allow mommy to stand. Her embarrassment was long since forgotten as felt a contraction. Minato. Rising quickly, Minato realized it was time to go. Come, Kushina-chan, I'll teleport us there. Nodding, she gently set Naruto on his feet and rose shakily. She took Minato's offered hand before small sniffs gained her attention, and she turned to a teary-eyed Naruto. Ah, don't cry, my love. We'll be home shortly. She comforted, wrapping the boy in a hug and holding him tight. When she felt him shake against her, she ran her hands through his locks in a calming manner. There, Naruto-kun. I promise we'll all be together soon. Pulling down his face mask, she wiped his tears with her soft palm before she pressed a kiss against each whiskered cheek and then one final one against his small lips. She giggled at his blushing face before tenderly tracing the lines on his face. Want to know something? When he nodded, she continued, I think Narumi is going to love her big brother. Naruto smiled. Growing beauty? When his mother nodded, he gave a wide grin. Finally, get to know her name. He hugged his mom one final time before she turned to Minato. Meeting his father's gaze, Naruto's excitement vanished, and he adopted a stern countenance, crossing his small arms. Minato grinned sheepishly. Naruto didn't so much as blink. Sighing, he dropped his smile, taking a knee before Naruto, staring directly into his face. Listen, Naruto, I know we didn't have the best. He froze as Naruto's small form wrapped around his waist. Shocked, he nevertheless smiled gently, accepting the hug and wrapped his arms around his only son. Nestling into his hair, Minato whispered low enough for only his ears. Be good now, Naruto. When we get home, I'll show you the first step of the Rasengan. Nodding excitingly, Naruto whispered his promises. Smiling, Minato silently regarded him before pressing a kiss against his forehead. Rising to his full height, he nodded to Kakashi, who gave the duo a wave. Take care now. Be home before bedtime. The two adults laughed at his antics, Kushina giving him a mock glare before she eventually smiled. Bye, Kakashi-kun. Look after Naruto-kun, okay? Kakashi nodded wordlessly and Minato grinned at him before lightly wrapping his arms around his wife. Okay, Kushina-chan, hold on. Biwako-sama must be finished the preparations by now. With a final wave, the couple disappeared in a yellow flash. Left alone, Naruto and Kakashi shared a glance before a silent conversation conveyed the two of them. Kakashi sighed. Ramen? His answer was in the form of Naruto cheering. On their way to the Ichiraku ramen stand, a familiar black head of hair caught Naruto's attention. Turning at the mention of his name, Itachi's face carved into a smile as his best friend sprinted towards him. Naruto-kun. He greeted happy birthday. Naruto only nodded in thanks before he gestured to his face mask. What do you think, pretty cool, eh? Itachi nodded slowly. Its black color suited him. Very cool indeed. Hey, who's this? Pointing at the small bundle Itachi was carrying with a sack, Naruto stared at the curious black eyes regarding him. This is my baby brother Sasuke. Itachi introduced. Say hello, Sasuke-kun. Sasuke shyly hid his face into Itachi's black shirt, causing Itachi to give a small smile. Apologies. He's very shy. Naruto just waved him off unperturbed. Ah, he's kinda cute. Looks just like you, Itachi. Naruto gently poked the young boy's cheek, grinning when small eyes narrowed at him. Oh, this was an Uchiha, alright. Itachi chuckled, before he gave Naruto a small nod. It was pleasure, Naruto-kun, but I must be heading home now. Seeing him nod, he addressed the man standing silently behind Naruto. Hataki-san? He bowed gracefully, before he turned on his heel and made his way to the Uchiha district. Naruto watched his best friend disappear through Konoha's busy crowds before a throat clear roused his attention. Didn't you want ramen, Naruto? The question was ignored as the young boy took off down the street in a burst of speed. Sighing, Kakashi followed at a more leisurely pace. Then Kakashi and I here gave me this awesome face mask, I-am-chan. Kakashi sighed as he listened to the young genin fill in the events of what he dubbed the best birthday ever to the gushing young girl. She wasn't even paying attention to his words. The young girl was just sitting herself on a stool on the opposite side of Naruto with her elbows on the countertop, cupping her red cheeks with her hands, as she stared at him with painfully obvious affection. Not that Naruto would know. He had pulled his face mask down as he ate the ramen and was currently chatting non-stop. He actually filled Kakashi with hope as he abruptly stopped and stared at the blushing girl. He leaned in close to her, causing the girl to squeak as she backed up, nearly falling out of her stool. You okay, I-am-chan? Your face is all red. Kakashi deflated, shaking his head, feeling the situation too troublesome to stress over. The boy was considered a genius, but when it came to girls he was denser than a rock. Not that he could blame the young lad, he was only 7. Hey Kakashi and I, how'd you do that? Kakashi blinked at the question before turning his attention to Naruto. Pardon? He inquired, taking his face out of his book. Naruto rudely pointed his chopsticks in his face, then at his empty ramen bowl. I am pouted at the shift of attention. How'd you eat with your mask still on? I didn't even see you move. Kakashi only I smiled in response. That's a secret. Naruto scowled at the Jonin as he shoved his face back into his book. He stuck his tongue out at the man and turned his attention back to the smiling I-am. He felt his face flush as she just kept smiling at him, her big brown eyes sparkling. What? She covered her giggle with her hand as she shyly beckoned him closer with a wiggle of her index finger. He turned his ear to her as he leaned his head towards her, expecting her to whisper a secret in his ear, but was shockingly surprised the soft lips met his whiskered cheeks. He blushed, facing her to see her equally red face as she twirled her long brown hair on her finger with a small smile on her face. Happy birthday, Naruto! With that, she quickly hopped off her stool and with surprising speed disappeared into the back of the ramen stand. Naruto could do nothing but stare at the seat she vacated with a blush still on his face and his jaw hung open. He turned to the currently giggling Kakashi, who had quietly witnessed the whole thing. Smooth kid. Real smooth. Kakashi and I. Why did she do that? Seeing the boy's confused face, he guessed he had only received kisses from his mother. Receiving one from another female was alien to him. Here. He handed Naruto his book. This should answer all of your questions. Naruto confusedly took it and read the title. Aika, Seduction. Make out paradise? Recognition came to his features. Hey! These are you perverted books that mom doesn't let you read around me. Kakashi shrugged in reply. Well, you're a genin now, so have fun. With that, he disappeared in a shunshin, leaving with a puff of smoke. Naruto grumbled as he put the book in his utility pouch and prepared to hop off the stool he was seated in when the sound of a throat clearing stopped him. He turned to see the frowning face of Tsuchi holding out his hand at him. Naruto was confused before realization dawned on him. Angrily pulling out his gamachan, he swore he would one day steal and burn all of the books in Kakashi's collection. Paying a thankful Tsuchi, he pulled up his face mask and began to trek home, cursing under his breath all the way. He couldn't believe that bastard Kakashi had left him the bill. That was a week of allowance down the drain. Seriously, that. He stopped as he felt his chakra began to randomly fluctuate. A chill went up his spine as his hairs stood on end. The air carried the presence of terrifying chakra. His heartbeat began to race and sweat appeared on his brow. He dropped to his knees as feeling of something terrible was about to happen settled itself in the pit of his stomach. His eyes widened in realization. Tailed beast chakra. Being born from a Jinchuriki, his father had explained to him that his chakra was very special. Very powerful. From childbirth he had already developed a chakra network, resulting from his chakra coming in contact with the Kyuubi's. This resulted in Naruto's chakra being unnaturally powerful and developing a sense to a tailed beast. And right now it was going haywire. But that would mean minus. Time seemed to slow down, and everything froze as the Kyuubi suddenly appeared in the center of the village in a blast of smoke. Naruto could only stare in horror at the sight of the mighty demon. People could nothing but stare, frozen with fear as the 9 tails shifted, trampling buildings with its sudden movements, as its 9 tails swayed menacingly, as if almost alive. A few feet in front of him, a seasoned-looking Jonin dropped to his knees trembling, his face the one of a man staring at death. Kyubi. At the whisper of its name, the beast let out a mighty roar so powerful that every window in village shattered. Naruto and everyone in the nearby vicinity were forced to cover their ears lest eardrums burst. The ground rumbled, and buildings shook as a small earthquake shook the village from the power of its roar. Recovered from their fright, the streets were filled with instant pandemonium as people began to run for their lives. Naruto didn't react as people rushed past him. It was as if he was rooted the spot. His body failed to react to the signals his brain was sending throughout his system to get up and run. It was a miracle he didn't get trampled as the crowd rushing past him seemed to part in an arc around his still form. Black suddenly filled his vision, and rough hands grabbed his shoulders. He lifted his gaze, finding a familiar Sharingan peering down at him. His form heaving and shaken, Kakashi shouted frantically in Naruto's ringing ears, "Naruto! What the hell are you doing? You need to get out of here. Now!" Naruto couldn't respond. Maybe it was the way his whole body started to feel like it was on fire, and he let out a scream as he felt like someone poured molten lava inside of his stomach. Kakashi repelled his hands from the boy's shoulders with a hiss, his hands heated red from the intense heat beginning to emit from his form. What the fu? Kakashi trailed off, his confused expression turning to one of fright as Stomp shook the ground and the Kyubi sniffed the air, its deep pants causing the wind to shift. It then turned its enormous head directly at them. Its glowing red eyes seemed to narrow in recognition before its jaw opened, steam emitting from its mouth, letting out another earth-trembling roar. But this roar was nowhere near as powerful as the first. It came out more as an accusing growl. What came next caused both shinobi's eyes to widen. Boy! Immediately its jaw opened wide and sphere of black and white chakra began to gather and condense. Seeing the menacing ball grow in size, Kakashi grabbed Naruto, hauling him over his shoulder, and took off sprinting. Despite the burn, he held him tight and pushed every single ounce of his chakra into his legs. Kakashi had never run so fast in his life. Despite his speed, he felt the intense burn of the gathering chakra, and there was a sudden rush of air before an earth-shattering boom tore through the air. Briefly glancing back, his eyes widened as the giant ball rocketed directly towards them. Boom! His world was spinning in a daze as a ringing sound filled his ear. All sounds were drowned out as the only thing he heard was the sound of his own breathing. He tried to stand to his feet, but that only earned him a stinging pain coming from the left side of his face. Trying to ease the pain, he stayed on the ground, trying to not move as he felt a liquid sensation stream down the side of his face. His gloved hand shakily moved to his face, and felt the liquid. Bringing it to his view, he saw that it was dark red. Blood. A figure suddenly filled his view. It was Kakashi. The man was missing his headband and had a trail of blood falling down his head as tried to shake the boy out of his daze. Bloody hands gripped his masked face and ripped of the broken ANBU mask that was blocking his face. Wait, ANBU mask? Naruto! The sound of Kakashi's voice finally reached his stinging ears and his world started to come into focus. The Kakashi in front of him was not the young teenager he remembered spending time with at the ramen stand moments ago. This Kakashi was noticeably older and taller. The steel armor of his ANBU attire was stained with blood and dents. The ninjato on his back was bloody on the handle, no doubt just wielded by his bloody fingers. Naruto. His eye finally found Kakashi. But why was he only seeing the man with one eye? He could clearly make out the broken face of the man in front of him from his right eye, but his left side was in total darkness. Then he saw it. In the reflection of the man's Sharingan, he made out that his left eye had a piece of shrapnel wedged vertically in his eye socket from his broken ANBU mask. And then it all came crashing back. ANBU Command had tasked Squad Alpha under the command of codenamed Dog to investigate the claims of Ta no Kuni being taken overrun. The Land of Rice had sent an emergency broadcast of an SOS to the neighboring nations before it was cut. It would be a simple routine mission. Scout and reconnaissance. Just another collection to the many missions of Alpha Squad. Young Naruto Namake's codenamed Fox Minus, the youngest shinobi in Konoha history alongside Itachi Uchiha Minus, had been a member of Dog's squad ever since he joined ANBU at the age of 12. They traveled in standard ANBU diamond formation, the captain leading at point, the Gen Justice Specialist and second-in-command Cat on his right, the long-range Specialist and Team Medic, Lizard on his left, and finally the fastest member on the team, the Close Combat Specialist Fox. They were deep inside the land, having crossed over the border when things went to hell. From the speed they were traveling, they didn't have time to react to the explosive kunai that came directly above them. Naruto, seeing his captain in the direct line of fire, had utilized a quick shunshin to knock Kakashi out of the way and took a grade A explosion directly in the face. It was his quick reaction and utilization of a shunshin that only the left side of his face had taken the explosion. That side of the mask had shattered and the shrapnel from the mask had taken out his eye. His life flashed before his eyes, and for some reason the day of his 7th birthday had ran through his mind. The day he had lost his entire family to the Kyuubi. It was his birthday. How he hated October 10th. In seconds they were surrounded by unidentified nin wearing musical symbols on their headbands and were mercilessly attacked. Naruto! The shout finally snapped him out of his daze, and he focused on Kakashi's tear-filled gaze. His mismatched eyes were bright with unshed tears as Kakashi gazed at the bloody hole where his eye should have been. Why? Why did he take the explosion for him? He had already lived his life, and this child had taken an explosion that should have killed him. Kashi and I. He rasped, spitting out blood. Mai. The left side of his face was leaking blood fast. At this rate he would bleed out. Don't speak, Naruto. Wiping the tears from his eyes, he began search through his pack for his first aid equipment, and took out a pack of bandages. He took out a small bottle of alcohol, popping the bottle open to drench the bandages with the powerful liquid. He quickly palmed a small pack of salt, and ripped it open, sprinkling the wet bandages with it. Brace yourself. That was Naruto's only warning before the shrapnel sticking out of his socket was instantly ripped out, and the cloth was put against his face. His screams echoed through the forest as it was wrapped around his head. The cloth quickly became drenched in blood, but it seemed to have halted the rapidly oozing liquid from his eye socket. Naruto thought back on his pain resistance conditioning, but the stinging sensation felt like the entire side of his face was on fire. The pain proved too much for him as he passed out, his brain forcing his body to unconsciousness from his overloaded pain receptors. An explosion shook the ground from behind them, and Kakashi turned to see the other members of the team providing cover fire. Lizard unleashed a lightning jutsu that shot from his outstretched hands and stuck a ninja that was about to throw another explosive kunai. It dropped to the ground, exploding on an unlucky group of ninja. Captain, we need to retreat, he barked as he shot out another lightning attack. They're moving to surround us. Kakashi quickly nodded as he hoisted Naruto over his shoulder. Full retreat. Cat, provide a genjutsu. Yugao nodded behind her mask as she blitzed through hand seals, layering a triple-layered genjutsu to cover their escape. Genjutsu, layered illusion. Lizard picked off another target before he followed Kakashi's lead, tapping her shoulder as a signal for retreat. They sprinted through the forest as the sounds of explosions and jutsu faded in the distance till the only sounds were their desperate pants as they made for the land of fire border. Each operative pushed chakra to their burning legs, desperately speeding through the trees, moving as fast as they could. Silently reflecting over this disastrous mission, Kakashi sighed. He should have never pushed Naruto to join Umbu. Thinking back on when he had first received the Naruto that day, all he saw was a 7-year-old full of depression and sorrow. He couldn't help but see the image of a young boy staring at his father's corpse holding the knife that he had killed himself with. He saw himself. And Kami, he didn't want Naruto to turn out like him. That's why he had been stern with his raising. Never showing mercy during training, striving for Naruto to be the best. He had pushed the boy to his limits. Even then, he edged him to go beyond that. He wanted perfection. It was already too late when he realized he had shaped Naruto just like him. He allowed the young boy to emulate him too much. He had shaped Naruto into something he always wanted to be, instead of guiding him into something he was meant to be. While sprinting at full speed, the tears slowly ran down his face, flickering into the wind. Thinking of the man he had come to call sensei, and the woman he had come to call mother, he had failed them. He failed them, turning their only child into something that he should never have been. His life was nothing but full of failures and regrets. This would be his final mission. After this, no more. He would retire and bring Naruto with him. They just couldn't get home fast enough. Only to be stopped by a giant snake appearing a cloud of smoke. Kakashi felt his heart clench as he witnessed the summon appear. How had things gotten so disastrous? A sinister chuckle echoed through the forest, the voice seeming to come from all around them. Kakuka, such a shame, the voice was mockingly sweet. You were so close. Yugao. She never took her eyes of the coiling snake as she heard her name. Captain? I want you to take Naruto and run. Lizard, you go with her. But Captain minus Kakashi. Yugao. Don't disobey me. Her tears were hidden behind her mask as she came up behind Kakashi and slowly took Naruto from his arms. Raikiri. Kakashi's arm was encased in lighting and the sound of chirping birds filled the forest. Go! He shouted as the snake finally took its chance and lunged for them. Yugao choked back a sob before she took off running towards the border. Lizard gave his captain one last look as he charged the snake, before taking off after her. Naruto awoke to find himself dangling over the shoulder of Team's Alpha-only female member. Trees were quickly passing by them in a blur, and the only sounds he could hear was the heavy breathing of female Umbu member. Feeling him finally begin to stir in her arms, Yugao stopped her hop, landing on a tree trunk quickly to lay the boy against a nearby branch. Lizard landed beside them and quickly formed some hand seals, his hands glowing green as he laid his palm against the boy's chest. Fractured ribs. First-degree burns on left side of body. And of course he gestured to the bloody bandage wrapped around the boy's head. His hands glowed a brighter green as he began to heal what damage he could. Naruto would need emergency medical attention to heal his wounds. Naruto didn't even pay attention to the assessment of his condition. Where's Kakashi? Lizard tensed but continued his jutsu, not wanting to be the one to break the news to the boy. Yugao lowered her head in shame. Naruto felt his heart skip a beat. Even in his injured condition, he was still the fastest. Pushing Lizard off of him, he blitzed forward, grabbing Yugao by the strap of her armor. Where's Kakashi? Yugao flinched at the intensity in his voice. Naruto, I'm sorry. It was Orochimaru who attacked, and she couldn't stop the way her voice cracked. Naruto's only reaction was his single eye widening, before he roughly pushed her, causing her to nearly drop off the branch they were on as he took off in a burst of chakra. Naruto, stop! Her shouts were deaf to the boy. Lizard reacted quickly and grabbed Naruto by his shoulder but got violently thrown into a tree as the young Umbu utilized a shunshin and disappeared in flicker of movement. Raiden felt the wind get knocked out of him from the impact as he silently cursed the boy's speed. Naruto's shunshin was said to be even better than Shursue's. Damn it, Raiden, after him! Yugao quickly took off in pursuit. He wheezed before he stood shakily and followed in a burst of speed. Cuckoo, not bad, Kakashi. Orochimaru mocked as he twirled his kusanagi lazily. The young man had fought well, even going as far as destroying his snake with that jutsu of his. If he had a few more years, Kakashi might have been a challenge to him, but he wouldn't get the chance. Orochimaru's tongue darted out of his mouth as he wickedly licked his lips, witnessing the many cuts that lacerated the Umbu. The snake poison he had layered his sword with was sure to kill him quickly. A grin etched its way to his face as he walked around the dying man, enjoying the way he withered on the ground. He mockingly used the flat end of the sword to flip the man over on his back as he pointed the steel tip at his neck. His right eye was missing, cut clean by a swing of his sword. It's a shame that your team was unfortunate enough to trespass in my country. He ran a hand through his hair. Can't have you leave Shinobi finding about my special plans for the village. Kakashi gave no reply. He had his single eye closed and was reaching deep into his reserves, gathering what little chakra he had left. Orochimaru clicked his tongue, no longer finding fun in mocking the poor man. Might as well be merciful and send him to the death god. Any last words? He poised his sword for a quick beheading. He wanted that eye in his head. 1. Kakashi wheezed. His left eye snapped open, revealing his Sharingan eye. Orochimaru was confused to see that it wasn't the normal three-tomo eye. The pattern was that of a three-sided star with each of the edges warped in a circular formation. Kamui! A swirling void formed itself around his body, and before he even could react, he was brutally wrapped into another dimension with a sickening squelch. The only thing that remained of his presence was his arm still attached to the kusanagi, as it dropped uselessly to the ground. Kakashi wheezed as he felt his chakra levels diminish as a trail of blood flowed from his Sharingan eye. He felt himself slipping as darkness surrounded his vision. This was it. This was the end of the mighty copy ninja. Obito. Rin. Sensei. I'm coming. Kakashi. The sound was distant, faint as a whisper. Who is that? Kakashi. It was growing stronger, piercing his agonizing silence. Naruto? Kakashi. The voice was louder this time, so close. Naruto. He snapped his eyes open, taking in the familiar lone blue eye above him. His form seemingly filled with last-minute vitality, as he felt some strength come back to his dying body. Naruto. He wheezed, coughing up blood on his clothed face. I'm here, Kakashi. Naruto sobbed as he dropped to his knees before him. He took his hand in his own, gazing on the man that had taken him in when his parents had died. He gently eased the bloody mask of his face, for the first time seeing Kakashi's face with his eye. Kakashi gave him a weak smile. Naruto. It's your birthday, isn't it? He only received a quiet sob in affirmation. Some brother I am. He gave a bloody cough before he settled. He didn't even give you a present. He ignored the arrival of his two squad mates as they quietly landed behind him. I'm going to give you a gift. Kakashi was giving him his eye smile. This Sharingan eye of mine. His hand reached up to rip the bandages away from Naruto's face, exposing his empty eye socket. Kakashi! I can't. Naruto couldn't even finish as he choked up with a cry. Naruto. He waited till he had the attention of the young boy again. I'm already going to die. But I can become your eye, and from now on I will see the future. But I can become your eye, and from now on I. A vicious cough erupted from his throat. He felt his vision dimming as the last of his life force was draining. Raidu! He wheezed. Perform the surgery, I don't have much time. This would be it. His atonement for all his failures and sins. The irony of the situation caused tears to pour down his eyes. Seeing Naruto in the same condition, he weakly lifted a hand to touch his face. The lizard-masked Anbu came before them, hesitating before he removed his mask, exposing his scarred face. He knelt beside the two and performed a quick succession of hand seals, making his hand glow green. Kakashi's smile never faltered as his eye was removed from its socket and placed inside of Naruto's. The whole time the boy never let go of their intertwined hands. Even blind, he managed to give his tradition eye smile. Good. Now Naruto, one more task must be performed. The fundamental law of all ANBU directives. Faced with death. Operators initiate Protocol 1. Illuminate the will of fire. The boy hesitated, breaking down. Seeming to notice his tears, Kakashi weakly lifted a hand to wipe away the tears. If I ever had a son, he would be just like you, Naruto. He silently conveyed the message, lightly resting a hand on Naruto's cheek. In his final moments, he finally realized what he should have been to Naruto. A father to a son. With a final whisper, his soft words echoed through the trees. Do it, Naruto. He couldn't see the mismatched eyes widen momentarily before they closed in agony. Focusing chakra to his finger till a blue flame appeared around it. Naruto hesitated, staring at Kakashi's face for what would be the final time, before he reached down and touched the exposed ANBU tattoo on Kakashi's shoulder. It sizzled on the flame before it gave a pulse. You almost look like him, Naruto. His voice never wavered as blue flames appeared from his feet and began to turn his body to ash. My father. His voice faded as the rest of his body was consumed by flames. The smile never left his face. Naruto had witnessed it all through his Sharingan, never knowing that the image would forever be burned inside his memory. The god of shinobi had his hands interlocked above his eyes as he gazed at the remaining members of Alpha Squad. To think that a simple reconnaissance mission would turn so disastrous. His old pupil would pay dearly for what he had done. Orochimaru's days were numbered. That he would promise. If that's all, you're dismissed. Take off as much time as you need. When the youngest member of the team turned to leave, he called out his name softly. He felt a pang of guilt as the young boy regarded him with his mixed gaze of red and blue. He had remembered the small child who had been devastated by his parents' deaths and was racked with guilt, believing himself to be the cause. Minato had sent himself to the Shinigami. Kushina had passed away from sheer chakra exhaustion and blood loss. The baby was a miscarriage. Young Naruto was left utterly broken, devastated to the point that the boy tried to end his own life from sheer depression. Till this day, the only memory he had of his father was the day of his 7th birthday. Kakashi was the one who carefully put back the pieces. He had given the boy a reason to live, a reason to continue this existence of life. He took the boy in, trained him in his techniques, fed him, cared for. Naruto had flourished. Becoming a Chunin at 10 was an outstanding feat, and finally, after a push from Kakashi, he joined the ANBU at 11. He and Itachi Uchiha were the youngest ninja in history to have such sheer skill that even ANBU couldn't ignore their talent. Kakashi had known he would make it hands down. He was the sibling he never had. And now Kakashi was gone. Killed by the mistake he should have ended years ago. Gazing at the boy who looked at him blankly, he felt all of his years weigh down on his tired bones. How's that eye? He started. Fine, sir. He had scar in the form of a line going down his face from his eye, almost exactly like Kakashi's. Curious, his healing should have healed any scar. But Hiruzen would guess that the boy wanted it as a reminder. Does it hurt? I'm trained to take pain, Hokage-sama. How is the chakra drain? Minimal. The Hokage's sharp eyes caught the handle of the sword attached to the boy's back. Where did you get that? From Orochimaru's dismembered hand. Do you know of the power that sword possesses? I'll learn. It's a dangerous weapon. When he got no reply from the boy, he tried again. What do you plan to do with it? Chop the head of a certain snake, Hokage-sama. The Hokage stared into the boy's eyes long and hard. Naruto stared back unblinking. Naruto. He started softly. I can't imagine what you're going through right now. But minus. With your permission, Hokage-sama, he interrupted softly. I'll like to be excused. Hiruzen gazed at the boy with a pained expression before he sighed softly, nodding in acceptance. I need to speak with Itachi. Hiruzen winced as that name was mentioned. Fuck. Things just couldn't get any worse for the boy. Naruto. He paused, weighing how he should break the news. There's something you should know about Itachi and the Uchiha clan. He loved his village, but at times absolutely loathed his job. Itachi has murdered the entire Uchiha clan. Orochimaru gasped in pain as he landed harshly on a solid surface. His body was badly mangled and disfigured. He groaned as he tried to push himself up, but realized his arm had been ripped off from whatever jutsu that brat had used against him. He should have ended him when he had the chance. Using his other arm to leverage himself, he glanced around in astonishment, finding himself in an alternate dimension. He noticed there was an innumerable amount of randomly arranged and differently sized rectangular prisms. They stretched out amongst a dark and seemingly endless void. They went as far as the eye could see. His observance was halted as he felt himself being warped again, and he screamed as his body was sucked from the void. He again landed harshly on a cold surface. Curses from his mouth froze at the tip of his tongue as he felt sinister chakra sources in front of him. If not for the pain he was in, his mouth would have been trembling in fright as he found himself surrounded by 9 cloaked figures. The red clouds on their cloaks already confirmed their identity. Well, the voice of one member was cheerful. The snake came slithering home. Kisame. Sorry, Toby. The full moon was high in the night sky, illuminating the cliff side in an eerie white glow. 3 figures stood at the edge of the cliff in total silence, as the only sounds heard was that of a rushing waterfall, flowing down into the running currents of the Naka River below. A chilling breeze blew in the air, making the silence all the more menacing. 2 of the figures had their attention focused on the man in front of them. The light of the moon reflected on his form, highlighting his Uchiha attire. He gazed on in silence as he stared up into the night sky. There was not one star. Only the bright light of the moon. The Sharingan in his single eye spun slowly, taking in what would be his final moments. He closed his left eye, absently tracing the empty socket of his right. That Danzo, he should have never underestimated him. Despite the situation, he smiled grimly, as if finally understanding a cruel joke. He had been after his eyes the whole time. He sighed in resignation as he opened his eye to gaze back up at the moon. Oh, how beautiful it looked, lighting up the darkness of the night with its majesty, its grace. Sure Sway. The soft yet broken whisper of his name caused his heart to clench. He tightened his jaw as he felt the sting of tears. He knew that his fate was already set, but the 2 figures behind him made the final moments all the more painful. His hands tightened into fists as tears began to leak despite his efforts. With his missing eye socket, the right side of his face began to drip with tears of blood. Using his hand, he quickly wiped the left side of his face, drying his tears. As he looked over his shoulder, the single Sharingan taking in the tearful faces of the 2 people he saw as brothers. One his cousin by blood and the other a friend that saw past the hatred of the clan. The 3 of them had formed an inseparable bond in the few years that they had known each other. Brothers to the end. Itachi Uchiha gazed into the single eye of Sure Sway and just knew now that any hope of sparing the clan was all but lost. It was unavoidable, no. He had prayed and hoped that the Sure Sway would succeed. He was a better ninja than he was. But seeing him now, the clan had to die. He couldn't stop the sob that escaped his throat as his body shuddered. He would have to kill them. The men. The woman, even the children. A hand settled on his shoulder, and he glanced behind him to see the masked face of Naruto Namikaze, his best friend that stood beside him through all of this. Their eyes met, and even though no words were spoken, a silent message exchanged between the 2. Be strong. Endure for the good of the village. That is the way of the shinobi. Itachi nodded to him as the arms slipped of his shoulder. He steeled his resolve and hardened his face. If he cried here, showed weakness, then he was unfit to wear the headband around his forehead. Shursui took this all in with his eye, and a small smile broke across his face as he turned to face the two of them. You two already know, but I won't die without saying that I didn't try. There is no way to stop the coup d'etat. A civil war is the inevitable outcome, and the leaf will be weakened. Our enemies won't just stand by and watch. Ultimately, the leaf will be destroyed. His Sharingan turned from one set of eyes to the other. Their faces stared resolutely back into his. A gentle breeze blew through the air, making his shaggy black locks gently sway in the wind. It was time. I tried to use Kodo Amatsukami to stop the coup, but Danza ambushed me and ripped my eye out. As he said this, his left hand slowly came up to his face to grip his remaining eye. Knowing him, he wants my other one as well. He beckoned the two boys closer with a wave of his hand. With a vicious yank, he ripped his eye out of his socket. Blind, he missed the two boys' flinch. Even though he ripped out his eye out of its socket, he never showed any signs of pain. Just the wide grin that he always wore during their times together. Itachi, please hold out your hand. Itachi held out his shaking hand as Shursui clasped it with his bloody hands and put his eye into it. I entrust you with my eye. Don't let its ocular powers fall into the wrong hands. Itachi nodded, releasing his hand from Shursui's. He quickly took out a piece of a cloth and wrapped up the eye. He finished placing it inside of his pouch. He turned his face toward the blonde. Naruto, keep working on that body flicker. You know its secrets. He gave him one of his wide grins, as if knowing exactly where his face was. He held out his bloodied hands to his. Naruto nodded as he clasped it, wiping away his stubborn tears. Because of Shursui, his speed had increased to the point that he was now the fastest shinobi in Konoha. Such mastery of the body flicker that he could essentially teleport. Shursui put his hands on both of their shoulders, holding them close. They ignored the blood running down on their clothes as their tearful faces gazed onto his bloodied, yet smiling face. Self-sacrifice, a nameless shinobi who protects peace from within its shadow. That is the true mark of the shinobi. Itachi and Naruto both finished the words in sync. With that, he gave them a small smile, and dropped his hands from their shoulders. He turned around and slowly began to walk towards the edge of the cliff. The rushing waters of the waterfall fell down to the Naka River below. Both boys gazed with tearful eyes at the back of Shursui for what be the final time. Shinobi Rule Number 25, a shinobi must never show emotion. It is a vulnerability. A weakness. An emotional shinobi is a dangerous shinobi. Protect Konoha. With that, his body tipped over the edge and fell down into the rushing waters of the Naka. Naruto and Itachi stood in silence, quietly reflecting that they had just witnessed suicide. Itachi breathed deeply as if suppressing the emotion that wanted to show, before he settled himself. He regarded his blonde friend with a look, seeing him in no better condition than himself. You should get going, Naruto. You wouldn't want to keep Kakashi waiting for your mission. The blonde blankly looked up at him from gazing down to the depths of the river, before he nodded to himself, and attached the umbu mask to his face that had been on his belt. He turned to leave before he hesitated and looked over his shoulder. When will it happen? Itachi had turned his gaze back to the Naka, watching an unmoving body slam against rocks before it succumbed to power of the water and got carried downstream. He was silent for a few moments before he answered. Tomorrow night. His voice was thick with emotion as his body began to shake. Naruto nodded, regarding him one last time. He would lose his two best friends in the span of 24 hours. By the time he returned, Itachi would already be considered a criminal, taking the fall for a village that never even loved him. Such was the way of the shinobi. Goodbye, Itachi. With that, Naruto disappeared in a flicker of movement, leaving Itachi alone on the cliffside. When Itachi felt Naruto's chakra rapidly begin moving away, he finally let loose the emotion that he suppressed for so long. With a cry of agony, he dropped to his knees as tears fell in endless drops from his eyes. Sometimes he wished that he had never been in Uchiha. That some other shinobi could be sent to murder an entire clan. Oh, how he wished. Itachi slammed his head against the ground, feeling the unbearable weight of it all. He clawed widely, pulling at his hair and slamming his fist against the ground. It just wasn't fair. His chakra spiked as a deep swell of pain emitted from his eyes. Tears of blood began to leak from his eyes as they snapped open. The three tomo began to rapidly spin before they formed together, settling into a pinwheel. The Mangekyo Sharingan. Itachi's screams went unheard throughout the night. 5 years later, Naruto snapped awake. A kunai was held tightly in his hand. The Sharingan in his eye was spinning widely, frantically searching for an unseen threat. Narrowing his eyes in realization, he dropped the kunai from his hands off to the side of the bed. He put his face into his hands, breathing deeply as he calmed his racing heartbeat from what was another nightmare. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and grimaced. This was the second one in a row. A seasoned Jonin, a feared S rank in every bingo book of the great nations. The Naruto Namikaze, Yellow Fang, suffered from nightmares. Pathetic. He groaned as he dropped back in bed, holding a hand to his forehead. When were these damn nightmares going to end? He pounded his fist against the bed in frustration, unknowingly stirring the other occupant in his bed. He turned his head to the side, gazing at the blonde who began mumbling in her sleep. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. Soon her quiet snores filled the silent room. Naruto scratched his head in confusion as his mind tried to process how this blonde had ended up in his room. It was all a drunken haze. He'd been at the bar quietly drinking to himself after a very difficult mission. He had failed a Genin team the previous day. Wanting to rid himself of the image of 3 crying children, he had to remind himself he didn't care. He chose an A class from the mission assignment desk to get away for a bit. Mission was simple: guard the VIP and his entourage and escort from point A to point B. They had reached their destination with no interruptions, and Naruto momentarily congratulated himself at the easiest A rank he ever had. It was the exceptional amount of pay that had blinded him to the fact that he should always look underneath the underneath. Turns out the VIP was really a drug lord and his seemingly harmless entourage were Yakuza. Their destination was a geisha house filled with young and innocent girls in training. The mother of the house was late on her payments, and he had come to collect his debt. Before realization struck him, they had already stormed the house and mercilessly cut down anything in sight. It was massacre. Unleashing his Kusanagi, he had come down on them faster than a bolt of lightning, Sharingan blazing and chakra rapidly spiking. The Yakuza had suffered the same fate as their hiree and had all of their heads separated from their shoulders, one by one. But with all of his speed, the damage had already been done. The small girl, cleaved in half, staring lifelessly up at his face, made sure he understood the depth of his failure. Money had blinded him. Never again would he fail to heed his sensei's teachings. When he had returned to Konoha, he marched straight to the Hokage's office and deposited 2 scrolls on his desk and promptly walked out. One contained his mission pay, and the other 32 severed heads. It was later that night he found himself in a quiet bar, nearly poisoning his liver with the amount of alcohol he had consumed. If there was one thing he learned during his career, you could drink as much as you like, but it wouldn't make the faces disappear. Little girls mutilated. Women screaming as swords slit their throats. Innocents slaughtered. The burn of the alcohol wasn't enough. All of a sudden, the hottest Yamanaka he had ever seen sauntered up to him. She was a Jonin. How old did she say? She was 20-something. Gorgeous body. They had began to quietly chat. Being the gentleman that he was, he offered to buy her drink, but she refused, merely wanting to talk. He didn't know what it was. Maybe it was the way her pretty baby blue eyes never wavered from his face, and paid rapt attention every time he spoke, or maybe it was the way her angelic face showed genuine emotion when he discussed his problems. Either way, his defenses broke and for the first time in life, told someone his life story. And she listened with all the intent of someone with seemingly endless understanding and kindness. He would blame his drunken state, being at an emotional high from his mission, but all he could remember was crying on her shoulder one moment, and the next thrusting into her like a man separated from his love for an eternity, and finally being able to unleash his long-since suppressed emotions, desires, needs. Lust. He needed that release, finally he needed it badly. His hungover mind could remember bits and pieces of that, but for the life of him, he couldn't remember her name. Oh well. He shrugged as he threw the covers off of him and climbed out of bed. He hissed quietly as his feet met the cold floor. He hated cold floors. Where were his damn slippers? His feet searched in vain around the floor for his soft and fluffy doggy-faced slippers. Blinking, he gazed back at the sleeping beauty and realized something. She was sleeping on his side of the bed. No wonder he couldn't find his slippers. He could have easily walked around the bed and acquired the fluffy and warm slippers, but that would count as time and effort, and so dismissed the idea. So enduring the cold floor, he slowly began the difficult trek to the bathroom. His Sharingan eye easily saw through the darkness. It was a cold night, he deduced as he felt a draft against his buttocks, but realized he wasn't wearing anything. Meh. His house. Closing the bathroom door, he quickly turned on the shower and let it run to begin warming up and turned towards the sink to engage in his daily hygiene ritual. A good ninja always kept up personal hygiene. Or is that what they told the genin these days? Finishing brushing his teeth, he rinsed out his mouth. Placing his pink and silly-looking toothbrush back into its cup holder, he reached for his mouthwash next. He hesitated at his choices. Bubblegum, mint and lemon. Tough. Deciding on the second option, he chose the cooling sensation of mint and rinsed his mouth out thoroughly. Turning to the shower, he stepped into the hot waters, feeling them ease away the tension from his stiff limbs. Holding up the ram sign, he focused his chakra pathways inside of his body. The water from the shower parted in a slight arc around his form from the sudden fluctuation of chakra, but returned to normal as he focused his chakra inwardly to his joints. The morning stiffness of joints eased themselves in one smooth motion. It was heavenly. Added with the sensation of the waters from the shower, this was euphoria for the lazy Jonin who absolutely loathed mornings. Why stretch when you could use your chakra? He let out a satisfied sigh as he tilted his head back, letting the water soak his long hair. Soaping up his sponge, he began to clean his body, absently whistling a small tune to himself, gently rocking his head back and forth. Reaching down and tending to little Naruto, he whispered words of fondness. "We did good last night, buddy?" Of course they did. He hadn't forgot her crying out his name and riding him like there was no tomorrow. Let it be said that Naruto Namikaze is always satisfied. Always. He giggled, remembering a certain situation where she had begged to lick the bottle, wanting the cream. Kakashi would be proud. But of course, he wasn't a virgin since the tender age of 14. Well, by that age he was already killing people every day of the week and performing feats that most seasoned veterans could never hope to do, but besides that, he was still a little young. But he wasn't complaining. He would never forget his time in Snow Country, or more specifically Princess Yuki. The Sharingan in his left eye made sure of that. Another giggle echoed in the shower. Good times. Reaching out for his shampoo, he hesitated. He frowned, trying to decide at his offered choices. Vanilla or cherry? Finally finished his daily morning routine, Naruto sat at the kitchen table in his luxury apartment waiting for the tea to boil. He was dressed in the normal Jonin attire. Instead of the standard blue shirt, pants and sandals, his were all black in color. He wanted them all to match the color of his face mask that was currently obscuring his face. His sleeves were rolled up and his plated fingerless gloves adorned his hands. Finishing his attire, he had the Kusanagi sword strapped vertically on the right side of his back in short sword form. It was securely held in a short black sheath engraved with the Uzumaki symbol. His headband was on the table, allowing his blonde locks to fall over his face. He slowly traced the vertical scar over his left eye as he flipped through another page in the book he was reading. Like Kakashi, he too was a lover of the Make-Out Tactics series. He would admit he was a pervert. But that was because he had a healthy respect and admiration for the members of the opposite sex. Oh, the wonders of the female body. He traced his lips through his mask as he read a particular graphic love scene. He had to hand it to Jiraiya. He knew how to write a book. A frown crossed his face thinking about the self-proclaimed super pervert. He hadn't been there for him. He was in pieces during the time of his parents' death, and Kakashi was the only one there to piece him back together. When he was younger, he didn't really think about it. But now, being at the age of 18, all the memories of his younger days kept coming back to him. He decided he didn't hate the man, but he wasn't a particular fan of him either. Meh. He shrugged to himself, dashing the thought, and sticking his head back inside of his book. Please, Master Jiraiya. She moaned his name as he continued trailing kisses up the side of her neck. His hands groped her breast through the fabric, deciding that she had the biggest chest in all of the lands. Please, what, Tsunala? He echoed, planting kisses at the valley of her breast. His hand reached under her skirt to feel for her panties, smirking when he felt that they were moist. His teasing was interrupted when two soft hands roughly pulled his face up to her desperate eyes. Please make love to me. He gently eased her fingers from his face, planting kisses on her palms. He smiled as he took in her pleading honey eyes, desperate with such love and admiration. Her golden tresses fell around her face, making it seem all the more angelic. He eased himself up and planted a gentle kiss against the purple star on her forehead. Your wish is my command. With that, he pushed her down onto the bed and began to ravish her clothed body with his mouth. His actions were encouraged by her moans and whispers of passion as she ran her fingers through his white hair. Fed up by the clothes on her body, he gripped the front of her green dress and ripped it open, exposing her bountiful breasts to his hungry eyes. Oh, how he longed to see them. She truly had the most magnificent bosom in all of the lands. His mouth watered at the twin pink peaks erect at the tip of her chest, awaiting his hungry mouth. With a moan, he cupped both her breasts and forced his mouth down onto. Naruto snapped up his attention from his book as the ringing sound of the kettle announced that the water had finally boiled. Darn. It was getting good too. Easing himself out of his chair, he made his way to the counter. As he gripped the kettle, and poured the boiling water into his awaiting cup. Technology, he mused. Water could essentially boil itself. What will they do next? Probably invent vehicles that would allow man to fly. He snorted at the thought. Sitting back at the table, he sipped his coffee through his mask, an elaborate trick that had baffled many. He might add, and returned to where he had left off in his book. Only to be interrupted yet again. Although, the twin mounds pressing into his head was an acceptable distraction. A warm tongue ran sensually along his ear, and he closed his eyes, momentarily loosing himself to the gentle ministrations. Morning. Her voice was soothingly sweet. His sharp ears mused it was a nice sound. Not one of those high-pitched ones that many of those broads had. Her cheek pressed against his clothed one, and her golden tresses fell over his face. His nose picked up the scent of himself and flowers. He breathed deeply. Sunflowers specifically. Gentle hands played with his ponytail. She had yet to take a shower, but he didn't mind. Her presence was oddly soothing to him. Morning, he echoed back, sipping his coffee. She eased herself off him and sauntered over to the other side of the kitchen for some coffee. He closed his right eye and allowed the Sharingan to trace her backside. The only thing she had on was one of his old blue shirts, that was way too big for her but still clung snugly to her form. The tomo spun slowly, taking in her long legs, shapely backside, and when she turned around, full breast. Kami have mercy 38D. Mouthwatering. Every day he honored Kakashi for giving him his Sharingan. His eye lifted to her face, taking in the roundness and slight puffy cheeks. She had a straight nose and pouty lips. Realizing she was staring, his other eye opened up and met her eyes with a curious gaze. Pale blue eyes stared into a dual gaze of red and blue. Riha Yamanaka decided that even with his mask on, Naruto Namikaze was one of the sexiest men she had ever seen. High cheekbones could be seen cupping the mask, giving him a slightly aristocratic look. His normal eye was an endless sea of intense dark blue that any girl would lose herself in. The Sharingan spinning in his left eye was only more intense with the scar that ran vertically down it. Softly sipping from the mug in her hand, she smiled at him. So Naruto-kun, how are you feeling this morning? He flipped a page, idly wondering why she was so cheerful. All right, he answered honestly. And yourself, if I may ask? She gave a dazzling smile, forcing him to hide his blush under Ika's white pages. Like I just won the lottery. Catching his act, she decided to tease him further. You know, you were amazing last night? She played with the ends of the shirt. I'm still a little sore actually. She purred. Naruto shifted uncomfortably, hiding his gaze behind his book. Really? He questioned, trying to mask the discomfort in his voice. Must have slipped my mind. She giggled, but didn't seem to notice as she turned her back to him and began to rinse out her cup. It would seem the rumors of your legendary stamina are true. You are really fast. She grinned over her shoulder, but pouted, realizing his face was still deep inside his book. I aim to please. Naruto quipped. Inwardly he was mess. You fucking asshole piece of shit, no good dog. The book was promptly snatched from his grasp. Gulping, he glanced down at long-toned legs, his gaze traveling upwards, drinking in her wide thighs and toned stomach. Her large bust captured his gaze, as his shirt did absolutely nothing to mask their roundness. I know my breasts are nice, but my face is up here. Blushing at being caught staring, he glanced up to meet her smug blue eyes. Not to say she wasn't staring herself. Up this close she could really look at him. You know, it's rude when you don't pay attention when someone is talking. He slumped, oddly feeling scolded. Sorry? He offered awkwardly. With his headband off, his long blonde tresses fell freely over his face, giving him an exotic look. She sensually licked her lips, no doubt remembering last night. But for some reason couldn't remember the face under the mask. When trying to remember his face, she only saw the red of the Sharingan. Frowning, she put the book on the table and approached him, meeting curious face with a shy smile. She eased herself in his lap and put her fingers at the top of his mask. She slowly began to ease the material down his face, but was stopped by his gentle, yet firm hands. Fuck. He knew this was going to happen. She was growing attached. Probably had feelings for him after only one night. She was nice girl, a really nice girl. But he didn't want attachments. She deserved better. His mismatched gaze met her confused one. Shouldn't you be leaving? He questioned softly. Her face bore a mask of confusion and hurt. Leaving? Naruto nodded slowly, letting the Sharingan meet her gaze. We agreed it would be a one-night stand, remember, no strings attached. Those pretty blue eyes, seeming to glow just moments ago, lost their shine. Her face bore a look of betrayal before it was masked by hurt. What? He swallowed the lump in his throat, inwardly knowing she would just be another one to add to the seemingly endless list. It was a one-night stand, remember? He drawled, ignoring his pause. He spoke slowly, allowing the Sharingan to spin rapidly before slowing down to a hypnotizing twirl. Her gaze was blank before she blinked and emotion returned to her face. She laughed as she slid off of him. Right. One-night stand. How could I forget? She laughed again as she made her way back towards the bedroom. Naruto didn't miss the pain in such a fake sound. He just sat there, quietly stroking his head, thinking of how much a bastard he was. Dropping his head back, he let out wheeze. I'm going to hell, he mused. First class. He was certain that the day he died, the Shinigami would personally come to collect his soul. Abusing its jutsu made sure of that. He glanced at the overhead clock at the wall. 8:15. He had a Jonin team to meet today at 9. Sliding out of his chair, he made his way to the sink and tossed the now cold coffee into the sink. Making his way to the table, he retrieved his book, easing it into his pouch, and picked up his headband. He tied it around his head with the ease of someone doing it essentially for years, letting the cloth cover his left eye. He was about to make his way out the door when a mop of yellow hair caught his attention. Riho was standing in the hallway watching him with a tearful gaze. She was fully dressed in her Jonin uniform and biting her lip. Feeling remorseful that he had to break yet another heart, Naruto just turned on his heel and made his way to the door. Slipping on his sandals, he gripped the handle of the door before he momentarily paused. It was better this way. Better to just walk away. Sighing, he twisted the handle too. Wait. He paused his movements but didn't turn around. Why? It's rude when you don't pay attention when someone is talking to you. Breathing deeply, he turned fully towards her. You have my undivided attention. What do you want? He questioned tiredly. His form was slumped, betraying his tall height and his lone eye dull. I want to see your face, she stated gently. His eye went wide before he schooled his features. He felt that at least she deserved to remember the face of the man who broke her kind heart. Easing the cloth down his face, he felt a bit naked as her wide eyes took in the face that No had seen since he was 7. He stood awkwardly, shuffling lightly before he shoved his hands into his pockets. Again his eye widened as she took tentative steps toward him before she reached up and gently started to stroke his whiskered cheeks. Did you put me under a genjutsu to make me forget your face? He wasn't surprised. He had suspected she was already aware by her movements at the table. She was a Yamanaka after all. He only nodded as she continued her gentle ministrations. Do you even remember my name? Deciding to be truthful, he just shook his head. Despite finding out the man that she had just slept with placed under a genjutsu, and didn't even remember her own name, she smiled up at him. You don't have to push people away, Naruto-kun. He lost his confused gaze, and was staring at her blankly. All the while she continued to gently run her fingers down the lines across his face. He kept up his stare, before he sighed painfully, and reached up a hand to halt her gentle strokes. Listen, you're a nice girl. A really nice girl. Someone like you deserves better. Whatever I said last night, it was a mistake. I was drunk, depressed, and probably going to run to nearest whorehouse. Forget about someone like me, and a finger on his lips silenced him. Her eyes looked annoyed. What do you take me for, jerk? You think I would sleep with any guy just because they're cute and tell me their tragedies in life? The question was rhetorical as she continued, please. You're hot and all, and your face is pretty, but you ain't all that. She finished, giving him a dismissive eye roll. His face flamed. Why the nerve of this woman? He hadn't felt so insulted in his life. She placed one hand on his chest, and the other came up to lift his headband. Nodding, her hand came to rest on his shoulder. Look at that. Now, here's a man with the most beautiful eyes I have ever seen. That night in the bar, these same eyes reflected so much sorrow, so much pain, that my heart couldn't bear the sight any longer. I had to talk to you. No, I needed to talk to you, because I've seen that look before. I used to see it every day when I would look in the mirror. His throat had gone dry, and he tensed as her fingers softly played with the material of his mask. You wear that mask to hide it all, don't you? To hide the pain. It gives you comfort, to know that you can hide it all behind that slim material, and no one would ever get to see the face that wants to hide itself from the world. Shame, what a handsome face it is. He was struck speechless. This woman, ask yourself this, Naruto. Do you wear the mask, or does the mask wear you? She lightly shook her head when he made a move to speak. Don't answer that. It's a question for yourself alone. What I really care about is that look. She tapped his nose. I never want to see that look again. Both of his eyes creased and his face set itself into a frown. How could this woman, after one night, read him so well? It was as if she saw past the carefully guarded expressions, the lazy attitude, and the mask. The mask that was the wall that held the world at bay, yet at the same time, held the deep anguish and despair that plagued his heart for years. His mouth opened and closed, yet no words came out of his mouth. How? Stepping on her tiptoes, she wordlessly answered his question by wrapping her arms around his neck, placing a sweet kiss against his lips, and then another to his whiskered cheek. Lowering herself back on her feet, she found the confused expression on his face strangely cute. Don't worry, you big oaf. All is forgiven. You're forgiving the guy who can't even remember the name of the women he slept with? Yes, I am. Her smile turned into a frown before she poked him in his chest. But don't ever do that again, to any girl for that matter. Because if I find out, I'll find you and mine fuck you. She glared for emphasis. Got it? He just nodded dumbly as she smiled sweetly up at him. This woman, he almost resisted the urge to pulse out his chakra and cancel the genjutsu that he had somehow been trapped in. He smiled lightly, exposing two impressive-looking canines. He didn't even notice as his hand wrapped around her waist, and like a magnet, she was attracting his form. He leaned forward, his attention solely focused on pouty lips. A slim finger pressed against his mouth, stopping him. Eyes shining with humor, Riha lightly flicked his nose. If you're ever in need of a friend, or a lover, she eased a calling card into his pockets. Call me. She gave his arm a warm squeeze and tapped his lips before she eased herself around him and placed on her sandals. She unlocked the door and was about to exit before she briefly glanced back at him and gave him a wink. Smiling, she closed the door and the sound of her footsteps faded down the hallway. Naruto was left in his apartment staring at the place she had just been. He scratched the back of his head, ruffling his ponytail. That was unexpected. Still, what a sweet girl she was. He palmed his face, realizing he still didn't remember her name. She could have at least been generous and told him. Although he was the bastard that had forgotten it. Reaching down into his pocket, he took out her card, lips turning into a grin at the message. Riha. 216-444-4194. There was a cute heart sign drawn at the end. Wow. That was better than any soap opera I have ever seen. The familiar deep voice caused him to wordlessly turn to the source and gaze down at a small pug glancing up at him with lazy indifference. Packin'. The pug ignored the ominous greeting. How long have you been here? Naruto questioned dangerously. The ninja hound scoffed. Long enough. I tell you, you're worse than Kakashi, boss. At least he had the decency to remember their names. Feeling killing intent, he grinned widely. Oh, scary, he reverse summoned in time to miss the blade that had pierced the spot he had been. It was at the memorial stone that Naruto's feet had involuntarily taken him. He was going to go to the academy to pick up his supposed team, but he couldn't go a day without paying his respects. Make them wait anyway. His lone eye easily picked up the names amidst the thousands. Kakashi Hatake, Kushin and Namikaze, Minato Namikaze. He breathed deeply, taking calming breaths as his body was racked with emotion. That faithful night flashed before his eyes. The ominous feeling of the Kyuubi's chakra. The screams of terror. The numbness of being told of his parents' death. His unborn sibling. The dread as he watched Kakashi's body burn to ash before his eyes. Inhale. Exhale. Breathe. His eyes snapped open as he sensed a presence behind him. He sniffed, picking up the scent of earth, alcohol, and a watery stench. Toad. Come out, Jiraiya. He heard a set of curses and shouts of how before the Sannin appeared beside him, a body flicker. The large man clasped a hand to his shoulder. How's my favorite Gaki? When Naruto slowly turned his face to regard him, the toad sage smiled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head in a nervous gesture. A certain redhead flashed in his mind, doing the same action whenever his father got particularly displeased with her. Focusing back on the present, Naruto regarded him with a dull look. What do you want? Jiraiya held his hand out in indignation. What? I can't visit my only godchild? Damn, the brat had gotten tall. Quickly glancing him up and down, he could see he was a great deal taller than Minato had been. A strong 6 feet. He shot up like a weed. Naruto stared blankly at him, considering the ramifications if the Hokage found the head of his last and loyal student separated from his body. Dark thoughts were interrupted as Jiraiya clasped his hand again on his shoulder. Don't tell me you forgot that today is your birthday, Naruto? The answer he received was a sound from the back of his throat as he returned his attention back to the memorial stone. He had forgotten. Or as the therapist would say, his brain would trash that certain memory to save his body from the emotional damage of remembering the day he had lost his entire family in a single night. But he only visited the man once before he was cleared. The Hokage had left a 12-year-old Naruto with the man for 10 minutes, and checked up on them, finding the peculiar sight of the man on the ground with his clipboard lodged up into his rectum. Young Naruto defended himself, saying he had warned the man to stop talking about his mom or suffer the consequences of finding himself with his clipboard shoved up his ass. He thought he was joking. The third had decided it was best that he should be put in umbu. Grinning at that particular memory, Naruto focused on the present. Today was October the 10th. The anniversary of the Kyuubi attack. I don't celebrate my birthday, in case you forgot, Jiraiya. Well, no matter, I got you a present. Really? Yep. You're honestly serious? Never been more. 10 years of birthdays and not one present. He did show up and wish him happy birthday once in a while, and then would be off as quick as he came. Some years he didn't even show. I don't believe you. What reason do I have to lie? You're cheap. Yes, I am. And rich. Yes, I am. Show me. He sighed, seeing that man didn't understand. The man reached into his belt and pulled out a blue book highlighted in gold, grinning like an idiot. He held it out to Naruto, who had gone deathly still, staring at the object in awe. Is that? He swallowed the lump in his throat. Is that the limited edition Ika submission set to be released for next year? If possible. Jiraiya's grin got wider as he placed the book into Naruto's shaking hands. Guess what? It's the extended edition, said. Only Jiraiya's voice went unheard to Naruto, who was gazing at the book as if it was an object that fell from the heavens. This was the epic continuation to the best-selling saga. Pre-orders across the nations had been completely sold out. Advance tickets had all but disappeared. He held what so many desired in the palm of his hands. He admired it for a few moments before he smoothly slipped it into his utility pouch. Thanks, Jiraiya. With that, he turned on his heel and walked away. Jiraiya's mouth dropped open at the quick dismissal. Hey! Wait, Naruto! When the young Jonin stopped at the call of his name, the Toad Sage walked up to stand beside him, looking like a sad puppy. That's it. I go through all the trouble getting you that, and all I receive is a thanks, Jiraiya, he murmured, failing to copy Naruto's voice. Naruto thought for a second. Yep. I at least expected you to be more thankful. What did you expect? I give you a hug and say all is forgiven. Well, yeah. You do realize a book, even though it's make out, is not going to solve 10 years of child neglect? The Sannin winced before his face finally lost its grin and turned serious. Listen, Naruto, he made to place his hand on his shoulder but dropped it. I understand if you hate me. I really do. I mean, knowing your parents, they're probably waiting on the other side just to kick my ass for eternity. But I'm man enough to fess up to my actions and say it was wrong of me to abandon you. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. With that, he gave him a nod before he turned and began to walk away. Naruto sighed as he watched Jiraiya go, no doubt knowing his conscience would bitch at him if he allowed the Sannin to walk away. Jiraiya, pervy sage, wait. Jiraiya stopped mid-stride, not believing what his ears had undoubtedly just heard. He glanced over his shoulder to see Naruto staring off to the side, his lone eye twitching as if what he just said had been the most embarrassing thing ever. Naruto didn't know what compelled him to say that. Maybe because it was what he had called him the first time they had met when he was 5. Or that puppy dog look that Jiraiya had on his face? Maybe he was becoming soft. Him. Soft? Never. All thoughts halted as he was wrapped up into a bear hug by the Toad Sage, who was uttering the lines of knowing that Naruto still loved his pervy sage. Fuck. He was growing soft. Remind me why I'm here. Naruto glanced around, taking in the rich and beautiful land of Mount Myaboku. Mountain ranges spanned the horizon, filled with lush green valleys and running waters. The air was crisp and clean, clear of any of the pollution found in villages. He took in the quiet sounds of nature. He had missed this place. It was soothing just to sit and listen to the sounds of nature. The frogs were always quiet residents, so that didn't hamper his reading time like it did in the noisy village. The sun was high in the sky, bathing the lush green with a golden glow. This place was truly beautiful. The great Toad Sage wants to speak with you. Jiraiya answered. Naruto raised his lone eyebrow at that. That old fossil wants to speak with me? Fuck does he want? Betcha he doesn't even remember my name. How ironic. Today he had forgotten the name of a girl that he had slept with. Show some respect, Naruto. This is serious. Jiraiya didn't have a smile on his face. Oh? Accustomed to Jiraiya's personality, knowing that whenever he wasn't smiling it was time to take the man seriously. Nodding at him, the two began to walk down a path that led to a mountainous structure that housed the great sage. Naruto turned his gaze to the horizon, enjoying the beauty of the land. In the distance he could see the inhabitants of the land idly go about their way. He even saw the toad boss himself leaping off some mountains. His sightseeing came to a halt as they found themselves before the mountain entrance. Standing as even more magnificent than Konohagakure's own Hokage mountain, the mountain of the great sage was quite the natural wonder. Standing at sentry on both sides of the entrance were two giant toad statues even larger than Gamabunta himself. Plated in armor much like samurai, they held stone swords in their deceptively looking human hands that were aimed downwards, blocking the entrance. Not in the least intimidated, Naruto and Jiraiya continued forward, not pausing in their stride. The marble eyes of the two stone toads snapped towards the pair as they came close. Their stone limbs groaned, shaking the earth as they lifted their massive swords, exposing two large steel doors as imposing as their weapons that groaned before opening silently. Entering through the doors, the pair continued their brisk pace through a narrow hallway, ignoring the way the large doors closed silently behind them with an unseen force, and the way the ground shook as the giant statues lowered their swords. They walked in silence before Naruto's single eye drifted back to the entrance. Say, pervy sage, I always wondered, are those two statues? Yes. Jiraiya answered cryptically. Naruto's glanced at him before he hummed to himself, idly glancing up at the priceless stones that adorned the ceiling of the hallway. Soon enough the two S-class shinobi found themselves in the presence of the great sage. The room they were in was enormous. The sage sat in a shallow pool of water with the kanji for sage hung over a red banner in front of him. The wall behind him was layered with stone scrolls covered in seals. The reasons unknown to him. On his right stood the two great elders, Fukasaku and Shima. The old green frog was smirking down at him as he walked into the room. Why? He had no idea. Shima meanwhile was waving at him, no doubt happy to see him after so many years. Being polite, he waved at her with less enthusiasm before he turned his attention to the great sage and waited. And waited. And waited. He glanced at Jiraiya, who shrugged before his sharp ears picked up the snores emitting from the sage. Eye twitching and chakra flaring, Naruto bellowed at him, feeling this whole thing was becoming a waste of time. "Oh, you old motherfucker! Wake up!" The great sage jumped awake before those eyes of his squinted in confusing before they focused on Naruto. "Ah, yes." His voice was a crow. "Come, who are you?" Naruto held his head, feeling the incoming headache of having to deal with the senile toad. The sound of Jiraiya face palming echoed in the giant room. Fukasaku was tolerant with the great sage's memory, no doubt being accustomed to it for centuries. He honestly wasn't surprised. "Honorable geezer, this is young Naruto Namikaze, the legacy of the fourth Hokage." The eyes of the great sage squinted, finally remembering why he had asked this young man to be summoned. "Ah, yes, young Naruto. I have summoned you for give me a moment." Naruto tilted his head back, gazing at the ceiling, thinking he could have been at home lost in his books. But no, here he was dealing with a senile toad. "Oh yes. The prophecy has changed. You are no longer the child of prophecy." Naruto blinked. Now this was surprising. Meeting the stone face of Jiraiya, he deduced the man had already known. Naruto tilted his head back, scratching his chin in thought. Leveling his haze back at the sage, he posed the first question that had popped into his mind. "So I'm not the savior of the world anymore?" He received a nod. "That's wonderful news." Judging by the shocked faces, his reaction was less than expected. "Naruto," Jiraiya started slowly, "do you know what this means?" "Yep. It means if this world ends, all the blame is on that poor son of a bitch." With that, he turned on his heel and walked away, whistling a happy tune. What a relief. I can finally read Ika Ika Doomsday without feeling scared. Dead silence engulfed the room as the occupants couldn't quite believe what they had just witnessed. "Haha. He's right." The great sage laughed, the sound of his croaky laughter filling the room. Jiraiya, feeling the incoming headache, posed the question that was on everyone's mind. "So, great sage," he trailed off as the sage still hadn't stopped laughing. When it died down, he began again. So great sage, is there a new child of prophecy? Oh yes, yes. I, who are you again? Never mind who I am, who is the child of prophecy? Ah yes, the child. I have seen that you will meet a monkey. The sage nodded. With that his head dropped to his side and his snores began to echo in the silent room. This world is doomed. Fukasaku croaked. Judging by the position of the sun in the sky, Naruto deduced it was probably around noon. Shit. He was supposed to pick up his Jonin team by 9. Over 3 hours late. That was a new record. Oh well, since he was already late, no point in rushing. His feet carried him to the academy entrance and made his way toward classroom 1B. Irika's class. He hadn't seen the fellow in years. Finally arriving at the class, he opened up the door and stuck his head in to see 3 annoyed faces. The 2 of the genin lost their annoyed looks as they recognized the person standing in front of them. He took in the wide eyes of a green-eyed girl with ridiculous pink hair. She blushed as his eye met hers and tried to straighten out the stains of her pink dress. Next up was the dark-haired boy sitting at the desk regarding him with a critical gaze. So that's Itachi's younger brother, eh? And finally the other one who had continued his glare since he came into the room. Hey, why the hell are you so late? A finger was rudely pointed in his direction. Decked in gray pants and a green jacket, finishing off his attire with a blue scarf, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi glared up at him. Konoha Sarutobi. Naruto walked into the room taking in all of their faces. His lone eye moved from face to other before it settled on the pink-haired girl who blushed and ducked her head in embarrassment. She glanced up in confusion as she realized he was pointing at her. Or more specifically, her forehead. Geez, you have one big-ass forehead. The almost Team 7 found themselves seated on the academy rooftop. The genin were seated around a set of stairs currently pondering the enigma that was Naruto Namikaze. He was tall, lanky, and had a lazy expression on his clothed face. He was currently seated on top of a railing resting his face in his open palm, his lone eye regarding them with a disinterested gaze. He couldn't seriously be a jounin. Or that was what Konohamaru had kept muttering as they had climbed their way up the stairs to the rooftop after the jounin had instructed them to, disappearing in a flicker of movement. Cole's eyes narrowed as dark blue regarded him. Sasuke knew better than to underestimate him. This guy was an S-rank shinobi. The Yellow Fang. Translation: one badass motherfucker. The aloof expression was probably an act. His sharp eyes took in broad shoulders, and large arms hidden under his black shirt showcasing powerful strength. When he had left them he moved so fast that Sasuke imagined for a second that he wasn't there at all. And by the way his eye was sizing them up, he was no doubt devious. And dangerous. From his tragic experience since that day when the traitor had slaughtered the entire clan, he had developed a sort of sixth sense to certain individuals. He knew the difference between a seasoned veteran and rookie chunin. He could tell from their chakra. And right now his senses were screaming danger. Even though the jounin was relaxed and looking like he would rather nap than be here, Sasuke could sense the tightly controlled power within him. Raw, powerful chakra was hidden under that aloof gaze. He wondered how many of his adversaries had underestimated him only to be killed before they could blink. His gaze locked on to the slanted headband covering his left eye. A Sharingan eye rested in his socket. The birthright of his clan. Yes. Naruto Namikaze was dangerous indeed. Sakura Haruno couldn't believe how much of a jerk this jounin was. First he had showed up 3 hours late, waltzing into the classroom without a care in the world. Highlighting punctuality wasn't his forte. Then he made fun of her forehead. She had instantly disliked him. And then he had the audacity to tell them to meet him on the roof and had then left as quickly as he had came. She decided that the so-called Yellow Fang was nothing but overrated. Humph. Who the hell did he think he is making fun of my forehead? Cha. Though the rumors of his good looks were kind of true. It was hard to tell from his mask, but his face seemed handsome. And his eye, she had never seen such a deep color of blue. She frowned at his headband covering the left side of his face. Did he lose his eye? Oh well, all she really cared about was that Sasuke-kun didn't think her forehead was too big. Meanwhile Konohamaru couldn't believe this guy. He had not even cast him a glance during their brief acquaintance. He dismissed him immediately like he was just another one of these losers. Did he not know he was? He was Konohamaru Sarutobi, honorable godson of the third Hokage and Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. He was a hero. Korra. Everywhere he went people treated him with respect. His chest would puff with pride knowing that the entire village adored him. He was loved by the civilians for becoming a jailer to the terrible beast. The ninja population of the village gave him nods of respect, knowing the weight of his sacrifice. And this blonde-haired pretty boy didn't even show him any gratitude. His brown eyes bored into the one lone eye that stared back with a dull gaze. Naruto had flickered up to the roof awaiting what would hopefully be his next team. He had routinely in the past told teams to meet him up on the roof and would quietly observe them, taken in their body language and attitudes. He was never impressed. It seemed the next generation would always have less talent and mannerisms than the previous one. Jonin would graduate from the academy feeling that they were the next elite Jonin or top kunoichi. PFF. Those were the ones that were sent back to the academy the next day. The so-called geniuses of the class were likely to pass, but so arrogant and prideful that they became the first causalities. This generation honestly had it good. They got to experience a childhood, having no idea of the horrors of war like his had experienced. Kids these days. Naruto lightly shook his head. He had yet to meet a team that was worthy of his standards. Eyeing the 3 kids in front of him, he reasoned that they would be another failure. Starting with the first one to arrive. The only sibling that Itachi ever had. Sasuke Uchiha. The class genius. By his critical observation of him, and the way his eyes narrowed, he deduced his reputation preceded him. Maybe he had inherited some genius from his brother? Next up was the Jinchuriki. Naruto could smell the arrogance emitting from the boy. His body language portrayed him as thinking he was the top dog. Someone that lavished in attention, and judging by his glare, he had expected him to be one of those fools that worshipped the ground he walked on. He didn't have any hate against him from the beast residing in him. But he honestly didn't like the way he acted. His father and mother had died sealing that beast inside of him, and the kid acted like he was a hero. Well, he would just have to show him that he was the villain. Next up was the last person to arrive. From the way her breath had been panting from walking up those set of stairs, he deduced she was the type that was more interested in boys than in her shinobi skills. He sniffed, picking up the scent of her cherry perfume, and had to wrinkle his nose. She was shyly glancing at Sasuke, trying to get his attention, but the Uchiha hadn't even spared her a glance. Girls these days. Clearing his throat, he caught the attention of the genin, while one of them, as Sakura, was the only one not paying him attention. He scratched his chin as he thought of an introduction. Yo. I'm Naruto Namikaze. As you may know, I'm the Jonin sensei of Team 7. Now introduce yourselves. He gestured at the black-haired boy. Sasuke interlocked his hands between his face before he spoke. I'm Sasuke Uchiha. The boy had apparently finished staring defiantly back at him. Rubbing his chin, he thought he should have been more thorough in introductions. What are your likes and dislikes, your goals, if you will be so kind to share? His eyes narrowed before he spoke. I like very few things and dislike a lot of things. What I have is an ambition, not a goal. His eyes lost focus as if imagining his dream. I will kill a certain man, and avenge my clan. That is my ambition. The 2 genin beside him were silent in shock before a chuckle snapped their attention to the blonde Jonin. His single eye was curled upward as if he was smiling before it fixed Sasuke with a pitiful look. What? The Avenger snarled at him. Nothing. Just thinking that the only way you would possibly be able to kill Itachi if he was blind and on the brink of death. Maybe then you would have a chance. He turned his gaze upward. Actually, you would most likely die before he did. Sasuke seethed in silent rage hearing the words from the Jonin. Who the hell was the guy to tell him he couldn't beat Itachi? He was an Avenger. Itachi would die at his feet. Feeling his rage reach its limits, he exploded from the steps, aiming a fist at the blonde. But before he could even lift himself up off the stone steps, he found a blade pricking at edge of his jugular. Looking from the tip of the sword, his wide eyes trailed down to the handle held in the hand of a not-so-lazy-looking Jonin. The lone eye was narrowed at him, and he had lost his aloof manner. You seriously don't want to do that? His voice was calm, but the threatening tone was audible. Sasuke couldn't stop his legs from shaking. Such speed. His eyes widened even more at the cold steel pricking his throat. He had thought the Jonin carried around a tanto, judging by its shortness, but it wasn't so. The railing Naruto seated himself on was about 2 meters in front of them. No short sword could possibly reach that long. He blanched, realizing he hadn't moved. He just had drawn his sword. What kind of sword could extend like that? His fear was momentarily forgotten as he watched in fascination as the blade slowly receded from his neck, shortening till it held its previous appearance. The Jonin smoothly sheathed his sword back into its hostler eye, still narrowed at the quivering genin in front of him. Don't try that shit again, tough guy. I have no qualms about sending you to the hospital. Capiche? His chakra spiked briefly, putting an enormous pressure down on Sasuke that caused him to fall back on the stone stairs, shaking like a leaf. He could only nod dumbly, feeling as if he just narrowly avoided death. And like a switch, Naruto was back to his lazy style as he regarded the other two genin with an eye smile. That goes the same for you too. The shaking genin nodded slowly, feeling that they had wholly underestimated the lazy Jonin. He had moved so fast that they hadn't even seen what happened. 1 second Sasuke was about to charge him, and the next he was frozen from an extended sword pointed at his neck. And his chakra, he had only spiked it but had caused the stones around them to crack. They didn't allow that curved eye smile to fool them. Sakura nearly shrieked, finding his eye open and fixed on her. Gathering up what little courage she had, she tried to keep the fear out of her voice. What? Your introduction, please, Pinky. He drawled slowly. Blushing and feeling like an idiot for thinking he was going to poke her throat next, she began her introduction. I'm Sakura Haruno. I like glancing at the still shaking Sasuke. She rearranged her legs. I like boys. I dislike annoying people. She regarded the wide-eyed Konoha, who yet to turn his attention from the blonde. And your dreams? Naruto asked, face in his book, not even paying attention to the trio anymore. They had gotten on his last nerves. Sakura bit her lip at that. Her dream right now was a quivering mess. Thinking quickly, she blurted the first thing that came to mind. I want to be a great medical ninja. Naruto nodded, flipping a page in his book before his eye flickered to the last member, then back to his book. Last and least, Konoha blinked as if snapping out of a trance before his eyes narrowed at him, regaining his lost confidence from that brief show of power. He rudely pointed at him, raising his voice to volumes that hurt Naruto's ears. What the hell do you mean, least bastard? Konoha Sarutobi is not least Kore. Finding his pattern of speech extremely annoying, Naruto glared at him from over the top of his book. Introduce yourself or get the fuck out of here. The genin recoiled at the tone of his voice before he lost his confident look and gazed at the floor. I'm Konoha Sarutobi. I like ramen and chocolate-covered bananas. I dislike onion. My dream is to become Hokage. He spoke fast and finished in a whisper, wrapping his long scarf around his face, seeking warmth from the Jonin's cold gaze. None of them were paying attention to him now. They were too afraid to. Snapping his book shut, he ignored how the sound had caused them to jump as he raised himself to his full height. 3 necks craned up to meet his gaze. He was tall. That slouched position really disguised his height. Naruto meanwhile let his eye roam from one face to another. A boy on a suicide revenge quest. A Jinchuriki with so much arrogance that it was palpable. And a girl that was more into boys than her already poor skills. Not to mention the confidence issues. This was honestly the worst team he had ever come across. Why the academy put them together he would never know. Already seeing the disastrous teammate skills and sure as hell problems, he came to his conclusion. You know, I was going to tell you 3 to meet me for survival training tomorrow at 9 for your real genin test. But I decided you're not even worth the time nor the effort. You 3 are going back to the academy. He continued, ignoring their shocked expressions. I don't know what the hell the people running administration were smoking when they put you 3 together. I can already tell you'd be the worst team. With that, he turned on his heel and began to walk away. Konoha was the only one that overcame his shock and shouted at him to stop. Wait. What the hell are you saying? What do you mean we're going back to the academy? Naruto shook his head at the genin, his visible eye growing cold. Are you deaf? You 3 fail. He paused at thought that this was the first team he had failed before even testing them. Well, there was a first time for everything. With a shrug, he disappeared, leaving behind 3 unbelieving genin. So you failed them? Yep. Naruto was currently seated at a table in the local dango restaurant. His form was slouched, and his face stuck in his book, missing the way the person seated in front of him frowned. Tapping her fingers in irritation, Riha reached over and pulled the book down from his face to see his annoyed eye. You know it's rude when you don't pay attention when someone is talking to you. That never got old. His gaze softened before he muttered an apology, slipping his book back into his pouch. He crossed his arms over his chest, looking down at the table in frustration. Sorry, it's just those stupid kids. They annoyed me to no end. He clicked his tongue, sighing as he turned his gaze towards the window, watching as people walked by. Riha smiled at him, gaining his attention before she held out her hand towards him. His eyebrow raised, but he untangled his arm from its position and allowed his gloved hand to rest into her much smaller one. She slowly removed his plated glove, exposing his palm. She rested the material on the table and intertwined her other hand with his. She soothingly rubbed small circles in his hand, smiling knowingly when she saw his shoulders relax. Naruto closed his eye as he enjoyed the ministration, silently cursing how she knew how to make him drop his defenses around her. He opened his eye, finding her beautiful baby blues twinkling and mouth giving him a small grin. Don't you think you were being too judgmental on them, Naruto-kun? I mean, they are just kids. Naruto stubbornly ignored the swelling pit in his chest, knowing that he didn't feel any shred of remorse for the teams he failed. But he was losing his inside battle as pink lips formed into a pout and forced himself to look away or fall to the charms of the sexy blonde. The soft hands massaging his palm weren't helping. Steeling his resolve, he stared defiantly at her, issuing a challenging look with his gaze. She smirked before she reached over and tugged his other gloved hand into hers before repeating her previous actions. Having both his palms massaged by soft hands, Naruto felt his resolve crumbling. Smirking at him, she delivered her secret weapon in the form of bringing up his hands to her face and pressing slow kisses on his knuckles. If they weren't out in public, he would be fucking her into the ground right now. From the triumphant look on her face, she would absolutely love it. Naruto mumbled under his breath, causing Riha to lean in closer to his face. What was that, Naruto-kun? He mumbled again, causing her to giggle before she leaned closer till their noses were almost touching. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to talk louder, she purred. You're right. I was being too judgmental, he repeated, sounding as if someone had stolen his book. His man pride had been knocked down a few pegs. It was always him being the seducer in his many relationships, but this girl just made him melt with her gaze. Deciding she had teased him enough, she reached up and grabbed the edges of his mask. She sensually licked her lips. Glancing around and seeing that no one was watching, she was about to give him a nice sweet kiss before knocks on the window outside turned their attention to an Umbu. The masked Black Ops member pointed a thumb towards the direction of the Hokage Tower, nodding in Naruto's direction. With the message delivered, he disappeared in a flicker of movement. Naruto cursed under his breath at the bad timing. Seeing Riha's curious glance, he elaborated. Old man wants to see me. She pouted but nodded nonetheless, leaning back in her seat. Naruto stood up from his seat, walking around to her side of the table before he discreetly glanced around and quickly pulled down his mask, placing a quick kiss against her lips. Mask back in place, he smiled down at her. My place tonight? She gave him one of her sexy grins before he winked and disappeared in lightning body flicker. Riha giggled like a schoolgirl, thinking about the fun that they would be having tonight, and smiled fondly to herself. Naruto was honestly the best thing ever happened to her in all her 23 years of existence. She cupped her cheeks with her hands, smiling as she thought back to the moment when he had taken her up on her offer and called. She had never been more excited. Looking down, she frowned, realizing he hadn't even touched his dango. PFF, him and his damn ramen. She was about to pack up before a throat clear caused her to look up at the fat dango store owner. He held out the bill towards her. A tick mark appeared on her head as she uttered curses, startling the owner. That no good. Naruto had left her with the bill. Again. Naruto appeared outside the Hokage Tower, thinking of what would the old man think was so important that he had to drag him away from his lovely fellow blonde. He frowned, thinking of all the times the old bastard had cock-blocked him. Bet he uses that crystal ball of his to spy on me. Walking towards the entrance, the two Chunin guards at the door immediately moved to allow him entrance, saluting at him as he walked past them. Naruto gave them a nod as he entered the building, appearing before the Hokage's secretary. A professional-looking brunette. Her attention was glued to the monitor in front of her as her nimble fingers typed away. The eyes behind her glasses snapped up to him before they went back to the monitor. The Hokage is awaiting for you in the conference room, Namike-san. Her monotone voice was respectful but dismissing. She was one of those secretaries. Someone needs to get laid. Naruto chuckled to himself as he turned to his right and began walking up the stairs to the conference room. He smirked, feeling a set of eyes trailing his form, but ignored it as he continued up the stairs, greeting and nodding to fellow Jonin and Umbu. Arriving at the guarded door to the conference room, the two Umbu stationed saluted at him before they stepped aside, allowing him entrance. Opening the door, Naruto walked into the dark room, coming to a stop before four seated figures. He frowned at the faces. He thought only the Hokage had wanted to speak with him. Why were these three here? Naruto Namikaze, we have news we wish to discuss with you. Hearing the voice of the village elder Koharu, he cursed silently, knowing that the situation was serious. He should have known from the mention of the conference room that whatever it was, he had either pissed off the higher-ups or was going to be handed a top-secret mission. Judging from the faces, he deduced the higher-ups were unhappy. The conference room wasn't true to its name. Sure, sensitive meetings and talks were held in it, but its true purposes served as top-secret mission assignments from the higher-ups to the select few. Itachi had received his orders to wipe out the Uchiha clan from these four. Naruto had been tasked to assassinate a daimyo at the age of 12 that had almost started a war. It was the super-secret S-class missions with fallout so severe that Konoha had to have no part in. Mission failure was either death or, in Itachi's case, issued missing Nin. But in his situation it was lose-lose. He didn't hate the old man for sending Itachi to kill his family, he understood the circumstances. But his respect for him had greatly diminished. Plus he let his arrogant godson run around thinking being made into a human sacrifice made him a hero. The bandaged war hawk, on the other hand, was a different story. He would savor the day when he lodged his sword into his heart. It was Hamura who spoke up this time. You were assigned to the Genin squad, Team 7 consisting of Uchiha Sasuke, Sakura Haruno and Konohamaru Sarutobi, correct? Naruto nodded, shoving his hands into his pockets, already knowing where this was leading to. The official Genin test for all rookie squads is supposed to be held at 9 am tomorrow. Koharu spoke, flipping through papers. Jonin teachers are to reserve judgment only after the Genin have been tested. She leveled him with her squinted eyes. So why, Naruto, do we have young Konohamaru complaining to us that you have failed their Genin team? The Hokage had yet to speak. He sat in his seat quietly smoking his pipe. The hat on his head obscured his eyes. Honored elder, I felt it necessary to fail them because I deemed that their teamwork skills would be wholly unsatisfactory. How were you able to deem their teamwork unsatisfactory only after speaking to them for as young Konohamaru supplied 5 minutes? She rudely interrupted. Naruto continued on unaffected. As I was saying, I deemed their teamwork unsatisfactory after watching their interactions and body languages. Sasuke suffers from the feeling that his only goal in his life is to kill Itachi. A road that would lead him to an early death. Pin Sakura is a delusional fangirl unfit for shinobi life. Her body lacks muscle mass for someone her age, most likely due to dieting. I would guess her whole point of becoming a shinobi was to impress Sasuke. Girls like her are best being sent back to the academy. Finally, young Konohamaru is an arrogant child under the delusion that because of his status as Jinchuriki, and being the grandson of the Hokage, that those around him should automatically respect him and essentially, and forgive my language, suck up to him. Which I don't do. Period. With having said his piece, Naruto patiently waited. He itched to pull his book, but right now wasn't a good time to be disrespectful. The two elders quietly mumbled to themselves before Koharu turned to the still quiet third. Hiruzen? The man didn't answer. He just continued smoking his pipe, remaining quiet. They both frowned before turning to the last occupant, who had been just as silent as the Hokage. His face looking like it was carved from stone. Danza sat quietly in his seat with his one visible eye closed. Seeing that the two didn't seem to be wanting to speak, they deliberated one more time before Koharu cleared her throat, the corners of her eye leveling him with a narrowed gaze. It was no secret that she wasn't the biggest fan of Naruto's, but he would tell it to her face that he hated her guts too. You will reconsider your brief evaluation on the Team 7. Tomorrow at 9 am you will issue the Jonin test them. You will pass them, is that clear? Konoha needed its last loyal Uchiha and Jinchuriki. Naruto fixed her with a cool glance. And if I refuse? He watched her face turn from red to purple before the lid on her temper was broken. Listen here, boy. You will do as you're told, and it was the brief spike of chakra that cut off her speech, and her frightened frame glanced to her right to see hard brown eyes glaring at her. She ducked her head in shame and remained quiet in her seat. Hiruzen finally lifted his gaze to the quiet Jonin. Removing the pipe from his mouth, he finally spoke for the first time since the Jonin arrived. Naruto, I'm afraid I have to agree with Koharu. Team 7 must become Genin. His unreadable eyes met his. You do understand why you were chosen specifically for this team, do you not? So that was their game. Naruto narrowed his eyes in realization. The Uchiha and the Jinchuriki. He was the only one capable of teaching Sasuke about the Sharingan and suppressed the chakra of a tailed beast. He remembered the moment he had discovered his powers. It was during his run-in with the Gobi Jinchuriki Han. 16-year-old Naruto laid panting on the ground. His Umbu armor was melted in some places from the steam-based ninjutsu attacks that battered his form. The Sharingan in his eye glared an angry red up at the large man, whose eyes curled in contempt down at him. Is this all from the son of the fourth Hokage? I must say I'm disappointed. The steam-based red samurai armor on his form seemed all the more menacing with his chakra shroud. He had been on a solo mission, deep in the enemy territory of Earth Country's mountain ranges. The mission was simple: investigate the last known location of Umbu team that had disappeared at this apparent location. The moment he arrived, his chakra went haywire to the feeling of tailed beast chakra and was greeted to the sight of the Jinchuriki of the Gobi. The battle had been one-sided. His chakra shroud protected him from his attacks, and that furnace on his back emitted steam that would melt him if he got too close. Han's 4 tails of chakra shifted in the wind, and he inwardly smiled seeing the hateful look the boy was sending him. The furnace on his back began to heat up, and more steam began to pour out of it. He had toyed with the boy enough, and was time to end this little game. He imagined the reward he would get, bringing home the melted head of Iwa's most hated enemy. Oh, the riches! Wanting to savor the moment, he slowly walked to the umbu, leaving melted footsteps in the earth behind him. Yes, he would take his time. Naruto, meanwhile, was struggling to stand. His chakra levels were low, his body armor melting off his frame, and the bleeding wound in his side wasn't helping one bit. His Sharingan took in with detail as the man approached him slowly, no doubt taking his time. His heartbeat was loud in his ear, and sweat mixed with blood ran down his forehead. He was going to die here. This man was about to kill him. He could feel the heat from the man coming closer. A deep swelling pit of emotion settled in his stomach. He couldn't die here. Not after everything he had been through. He wouldn't. His chakra spiked and feeling of calm overcame him. The tailed beast chakra that had been bearing down at him since the beginning of the fight seemed to not affect him anymore, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. This power. With a roar, he let loose the power that had been building up inside of him, and 4 sets of golden chains seeming to come from his body shot out of his form and wrapped around the surprised Gobi container. The chakra chains wrapped around his form, interlocking with each other, going so far as holding down his chakra tails. Han was left completely bounded by the chains, desperately struggling to break free. Naruto gasped in shock. He could feel the chains as if they were an extension of himself. He felt the way they wrapped around red chakra from the Jinchuriki. He titled his head and was surprised when Han let out a pained gasp as the chains apparently tightened around him, squeezing painfully. He couldn't explain why, but for some reason the word submit ran through his mind, and he watched in fascination as the chains pulsed a brilliant glow before they began to absorb the Gobi's chakra. Naruto felt a swell of power inside of him, and realized that his chakra levels were returning. Han dropped to his knees as the last of the Gobi's chakra left him. He tried in vain to call upon the chakra of the beast, to no avail. He shuddered in pain, hearing the cracks of his body as the chains tightened even more. His armor cracked under the pressure, and began to fall off his constricting form. Orange eyes widened despite the pain as they heard the sound of chirping birds fill the air. Naruto was now standing on his feet, his left hand holding his wrist as he focused the Raikiri in his hand. His Sharingan twirled a menacing red as they met his orange eyes. Feeling vindictive, he slowly walked towards the struggling man, the chains all the while keeping the Jinchuriki constricted. Now standing directly in front of him, Han could only stare up at him in awe before he decided he had to pose the question that plagued his mind. How? Naruto shrugged. I honestly don't know. I guess this is the power of an Uzumaki. Han nodded despite the pain, and closed his eyes in resignation. The last thing he heard was the sound of the Gobi screaming descendant before a lightning-covered hand pierced his head. Rido? Naruto? Blinking, Naruto's mind returned to the present, looking at the Hokage's curious face. Sorry? He posed. I said, do you understand? Hiruzen repeated, wondering why the Jonin had zoned out. Naruto nodded slowly. Is that all? No. There is something else we wish to discuss with you. It was Danzo who finally spoke, shifting in his seat to sit up straighter. His one eye opened and regarded him with a gaze he couldn't read. What do you know about the organization Akatsuki? This was unexpected. Naruto's mouth formed into a thin line under his mask. I know that it is composed of 10 S-ranked criminals, Itachi being one of them. They're a mercenary group. Itachi had supplied him everything he knew on Akatsuki. The genocide of his clan was just a ruse to gain their attention. His real mission was to infiltrate the organization as a double agent and supply information on their motives back to Konoha. The sacrifices he made. Yes. Danzo spoke. That's what we all were led to believe. He paused before continuing. Their real motives are gathering the tailed beast. Naruto couldn't stop his mouth from opening. The tailed beast. What would a group of 10 criminals want with the tailed beast? Danzo elaborated, seeing his expression. It is unknown what they want with the tailed beast. But we were supplied with some interesting, if uncomfortable, news. The faces of the elders and the Hokage were grim. Orochimaru is a member. The Sharingan in his socket burned at the mention of the name, but he controlled his anger. It was led to believe that he had defected from the group before in the past. But as our informant has supplied, he was accepted back into their ranks for unknown reasons. The room was silent before the voice of the third rang out. What do you think of this news, Naruto? What was he supposed to think? The snake that had killed the man who had molded him into a shinobi was running around with powerful friends. And those same friends wanted the tailed beast. I think that you should have killed him when you had the chance, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen didn't react to the jab, but his eyes narrowed before he let out a pained sigh. He took the hat off his head and ran his hand through his dull hair. His gaze shifted back to Naruto, looking more like he was finally feeling the weight of his old age. I know I have made many mistakes in the past, Naruto. Many mistakes. But you have to understand. Save me the lecture, Hokage-sama. You should have corrected your. The wood of the desk broke under the power of Hiruzen's fist, effectively silencing Naruto. So correct my mistakes, boy. Become Hokage and fix the many imperfections that I have caused. The wood groaned under the force of powerful chakra, reminding Naruto that even though the man was old, he was still the god of shinobi. The third breathed deeply, exhaling out his anger before he regarded Naruto with a sad look. Hiruzen held up his hat to him, his face pleading. Please, Naruto. Your power already outshines us all. Even your father's. I'm an old man in need of successor. Become the Hokage Konoha needs. The third had pestered him countless times in the past to become the Hokage. The Fire Lord had already held him in high favor, and the shinobi population had the utmost respect for him. But as many times the Hokage had offered, he had refused. He just couldn't accept it. As Hiruzen gazed at the young man before him, he saw a shinobi that led with the wisdom of a kage. A true individual that had mastered the way of the shinobi. Genin at 7. Chunin at 10. Anbu Captain at 13. Elite Jounin at 16. Naruto was the Hokage Konoha needed. The Hokage Konoha deserved. You already know what I'm going to say, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen stared into his face for a moment before he closed his eyes, placing the hat back on his head. Jounin Naruto Namazake, you are dismissed. His voice was unreadable. Naruto bowed stiffly before turning on his heel and walking out the door. He didn't react as his sharp ears caught the whisper the Hokage mumbled before he closed the door. He tried to keep his expression blank as we walked down the stairs, but the frown hidden behind his mask wouldn't budge. Your father would be disappointed. Sasuke walked down the empty streets of the Uchiha compound, thinking back on the previous events that took place. Or more specifically, his mind was still trying to decipher the enigma that was the blonde Jounin. He absently traced his neck where the point of his sword had pricked him. He still couldn't get over how fast the Jounin had moved. And the feel of his chakra. He had never seen someone with chakra powerful enough to cause such effects to the environment. He shuddered, remembering the overbearing weight of it, as it felt as if he would choke to death. He was powerful. The rumors of strength throughout the village were not misplaced. He was entirely worthy of his S-rank status. At the sight of a light in the Uchiha main house and the smell of fresh cooking filled the air, Sasuke dismissed his mental turmoil. His lips curled upward at the sound of humming, and he stepped up to the porch and opened the sliding doors. Stepping into his house, he slid off his sandals and announced his arrival. I'm home. Oh, good evening, sweetheart. A thrill voice rang back. He walked into the kitchen to see a familiar female working around the kitchen. On the table was freshly cooked fish layered with tomatoes and side dishes. A black head of hair swayed as a beautiful face turned to regard him. A giant bowl of rice was held in her hands. Hi, sweetie. Sasuke smiled, feeling the tension in his muscles easing at the sight of beautiful dark eyes. Hi, Mom. He quietly seated himself at the table, smiling up at her as she set the bowl on the table and leaned across it to place a gentle kiss on his forehead. Easing into her seat, she smoothed the ripples on her black dress. She smiled brilliantly at him. She began to fill her plate with food. Muttering a quiet itadakimasu, she dug into her food, chewing softly, before fixing him with another smile. So how was your day? Sasuke had muttered his quiet itadakimasu before he began to eat a slice of tomato. I don't want to talk about it, he said in between bites. Mikoto pouted at him, being so moody. Sasuke-chan, can you at least tell me who your Jounin-sensei is? At the mention of Jounin, Sasuke's mood darkened before he averted his gaze. Frowning, she began to probe. What's wrong, Sasuke? Swallowing thickly, he decided to answer. He failed us. Mikoto frowned even more at this. Wasn't the Jounin issued to test them the next day for survival training? Her mouth opened to ask further questions before a knock was heard at the front door. Sasuke's eyes snapped to the door. They weren't expecting any visitors today. He heard a panicked gasp and cursed. Mikoto had her eyes wide, holding her head, and was shaking in a fear. She stood up abruptly from the table, knocking it over and spilling the food. Her quivering form slid against the sink before she dropped to the floor. "They're coming for me! They're coming for me!" she shrieked as her eyes began to claw at her hair. "They're going to kill me!" Sasuke quickly leaped over the mess to reach his mother, and he fell to his knees to grip her hands that were clawing at her hair. His Sharingan spun to life, taking in her crazed eyes and badly twitching form. She had not been taking her medication. His hands guided her face to his as he focused chakra into his eyes, ignoring her audible mumbles. "Relax, mother. You're safe." Her wide eyes lost their crazy glint and her mumbles became whispers. Her eyes lowered in a trance, and he held her until her shaking stopped. Seeing that she was safely lobotomized and couldn't hurt herself, he palmed a kunai and slowly made his way to the door. He deactivated his Sharingan as he reached to slide it open. Cracking it open, he saw the curious gaze of a lone blue eye staring at him. "What do you want?" he sneered. Naruto ignored his tone as he took in Sasuke's guarded look and tense form. His sharp ears had heard shrieks, and the scent of fresh food was strong. "Mikoto," he mused. He didn't understand why Itachi had spared her. He had thought the only one he was going to leave alive was Sasuke. But it seemed that Itachi just couldn't bring himself to kill his mother. He personally knew the woman from a young age as his mother, and she had been friends. Other than knowing her, there was little interaction between them. "I'm just here to tell you that you are to meet me at Training Ground 7 at 9 sharp." Sasuke was surprised, but he nodded nonetheless. "I have already told the other two the same thing." Naruto scratched his cheek, looking uncomfortable. "I want to say I'm sorry for what happened on the rooftop. I mean, if you want to go ahead and if you want to kill Itachi, it's whatever floats your boat." I smiled at the boy just standing there. Sasuke waited before he frowned at him. "You can go now." Naruto scratched the back of his, looking even more uncomfortable. How's Mikoto doing?" Sasuke's eyes narrowed at him and the Sharingan spun to life in his eyes. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the sight. When did he unlock his Sharingan? "How do you know my mother?" Sasuke knew that this man could kill him in a flash, but he would rather die than let one of these bastards come for his mom. "Our mothers used to be BFFs." He titled his head at him. "Met her a couple of times in the past. Sweet lady. And a hot one." Sasuke's eyes widened in realization. "You were that blonde umbu that always used to come with Shursui for Itachi." He remembered his brother leaving every day with the two for missions. Itachi had said that they formed the best umbu squad that Konoha ever had. He had never known his identity, as the blonde had never spoken or interacted with him. "She's fine," he added stiffly, no doubt not wanting to tell the Jonin that his mom suffered from a mental disorder. A phobia from the books he had read. She couldn't even leave the house from her severe fear. Sasuke had taken the responsibility of shopping for food and clothes at the same time keeping up his ninja training. Seeing his mom in her condition every day only added fuel to his fire of revenge. He will avenge his clan. "All right." Naruto nodded at him before he held his hands up into a peace sign and disappeared as if he hadn't been standing on his porch at all. Sliding the door shut, Sasuke cut the chakra from his eyes and sighed as he walked back into the kitchen. Eyeing the mess distastefully, he walked over to his mother, seeing her still under the genjutsu. With a grunt, he helped her to stand and began to direct her out of the kitchen, into the hallway and up the stairs to her room. Slipping her gently into bed, he let his Sharingan spin into her eye that forced her into a genjutsu-induced sleep. Gently covering her with blankets, he let his eyes wander over her. Her sleeping face was angelic, no longer the frightened mess that haunted him in his sleep. His hands formed into fists before the sounds of his knuckles cracking filled the quiet room. Itachi would pay. He quietly listened to her soft snores before he walked out the room, gently closing her door behind him. Checking the time, he saw that it was well after 10. Arriving into the kitchen, he soundlessly cleaned up the mess and dumped the wasted food into the garbage. He had lost his appetite anyways. Exiting the back of his house, he walked to the private training grounds and continued on to the forest behind the house. Entering into a clearing, his Sharingan stared hatefully at 8 individual targets lined up into the trees surrounding him. He had accompanied Itachi in his younger years to this place, witnessing his impossible skill of hitting each target. And even the one lined up behind the rock as blind spot. Palming kunai and pushing chakra to his legs, he leaped into the air, twirling gracefully as he let the kunai fly from his fingers. His movements mimicked his brother's as he threw them, making them clash together to change trajectory and hit the targets. Landing soundless, he surveyed his work. He sneered at seeing he only hit 5 of the 8 targets. Walking around the rock, he saw that he had completely missed the blind spot. He slammed his hand against the rock in frustration, the crushing feeling of failure swelling in his chest. He still wasn't good enough. His eyes stung with unshed tears as he began to retrieve his kunai. Itachi was always ahead of him. Always. Even at his age, he had been an Anbu captain long since mastering the Sharingan at the age of 8. The measuring ladder never seemed longer between them. Your movements are too stiff. Sasuke instantly threw his kunai to the sound of the voice and saw the blonde Jonin seated on a branch high in a tree reading his book. The kunai he threw had been plucked out the air, twirling in between his fingers. He hadn't even looked up from his book. Finally leveling Sasuke with a curious eye, he repeated, "Your movements are too stiff. Too tense. You need to relax as you throw." Sasuke didn't let up his glare. "Why are you here? Have you been spying on me?" Naruto placed his book into his pouch before he soundlessly dropped before the paranoid Jonin, inwardly smiling when he saw him tense. "I was in the neighborhood," he supplied in a rather unconvincing manner. Sasuke just stared. Naruto shrugged before he glanced around at the targets smiling under his mask at the fond memories he remembered here. His gaze found the annoyed Uchihas before he poked the boy in the center of his forehead. "You need to relax when you throw. Tension will hamper your movements." Sasuke glared up at him as he rubbed his forehead, sneering at him. "And I suppose you're an expert at this?" Naruto smiled. "Why, yes, I am. Who do you think showed Itachi how to hit multiple moments at the same time?" That wasn't true. It had been the other way around, but Sasuke didn't need to know that. His eyes lost their harsh look before he gazed curiously up at him. "You taught Itachi how to do this?" "Yep." Looking like he was having an internal battle, Sasuke grimaced, his cheeks turning red, and he averted his gaze. Holding up to kunai in his hands, he looked extremely uncomfortable. "Can you show me, please?" Naruto reached up and exposed his Sharingan to the surprised Jonin. "Sure." A moan echoed in the quiet apartment as the wet sound of flesh meeting flesh began to steadily grow louder. Two bodies sleeked with sweat kept up the breakneck rhythm as their hips met together in tandem, causing the woman to let out another moan of pleasure. Riha's long hair was damp with sweat as she threw her head back, letting a scream echo in the apartment as her insides tightened around the man deep inside of her. She was so close. The previous position of having her legs over his shoulders shifted, and soon the sensation of having his chest smashing into hers with each powerful thrust he took had her screaming. Shuddering as her sensitive spot was hit, she wrapped her legs around his waist, arms grabbing his shoulders, as she bucked against him. In return, he gripped the headboards at the top of the bed for leverage and began another deep set of thrust. Riha couldn't hold back her shout. "So deep! So fucking dia!" The arms that had been on his shoulders lowered to her chest, and a mismatched gaze took in the sight of her bountiful breasts mashing together as her insides tightened around him. The only warning was a groan before the familiar sensation of hot liquid filled her gushing core. Her hands spread wide, gripping the bed sheets hard, causing them to rip as her bountiful chest bounced with a set of final thrusts that soon slowed to a stop. They both finished panting, taking a minute to calm their breaths. The man in question eased himself out of her and wiped the sweat from his brow before he smirked down at the panting blonde. They had been going steady since dawn. She had come 3 times, him only once, and judging by the look on her face, she was still desperate for more. One hand was squeezing her luscious chest, and the other was rubbing her dripping core. Oh yes, she wanted more. "Turn around." His voice was gruff, laced with lust as he watched the platinum blonde obediently obey his commands and presented her shapely rear to him with one side of her face resting on the pillows, gazing at him with her lust-filled baby blues. Sharingan twirling in anticipation, taking every detail of her shapely curves and round chest, Naruto needed no urging to fill her once again till his hips hit her round ass. She let out another cry of pleasure once again at being filled so deep by him and pushed her hands against the bed rest in preparation for the incoming thrust. Naruto meanwhile took a few seconds to adjust to the sensations of her ass. Oh fuck. She was so tight. He felt himself immediately welcomed by slick insides that clenched around him as he gave a quick thrust, causing her to moan his name. He grabbed her hips, holding her steady, and immediately began another breakneck rhythm that Riha welcomed as she pressed herself into his thrust in tandem. Yes, Naruto. Harder, yes, 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 yes. The new position was short-lived as Riha pressed her face deep into the pillows to muffle her scream as she came around Naruto once again. He couldn't resist her already suffocating ass, and in response a shudder escaped his mouth as he gave a few final thrusts and emptied inside of her. Naruto let his body heavily collapse on hers, and for a few moments the only sounds in the room were the pants of the two occupants. After finally catching his breath, Naruto slowly eased himself out of her and collapsed on the bed holding a hand to his forehead. He couldn't keep the smirk off his face as he wiped back his slick blonde locks from his face and lay there contentedly, inwardly congratulating himself on yet another job well done. He opened his eyes to see Riha finally ease herself out of her position on her knees and stretched her body upwards, receiving satisfying cracks before she heavily collapsed on him, pushing her face into the crook of his neck. Her tired breasts tickled his skin and Naruto felt her rapidly beating heartbeat. Someone needs to work on their stamina. He drawled as he eased the covers over them and wrapped his arms around her, enjoying the feeling of her cool skin against his. He gave a soft kiss to her neck and contentedly rubbed his cheek against hers. Riha's response came out as a tired mumble. Sorry? A grin was on his face from the feeling of her lips whispering against his skin. Sorry, I'm not stem meine Freak. Her voice trailed off as her quiet snores filled the silent room and her slow heartbeat began to drum against his chest. His silent laughter made her face bounce up and down against his chest, but it did nothing to disturb her unresponsive form. Yep. She was out like a light bulb. Peeking a glance at the clock hanging on his wall reading 9:15, Naruto remembered that he had assigned the Jonin to meet him at Training Ground 7 at 9 sharp. He was already 15 minutes late. Glancing from the clock to the sleeping beauty on his chest, then back to the clock, and finally to the softly snoring blonde, Naruto reluctantly decided he should show some professionalism and started to slowly ease Riha off of him. Best to not waste any more time. Only to have her sleeping form wrap her arms around his head and push him face first into her soft chest. It would be another 2 hours before Naruto decided to get up. Konoha grit his teeth in frustration as he marched back and forth around the training field as he felt his already short temper at its limits from the ridiculous lateness of the team sensei. It was well past noon. The source of his current anger was the pink-haired member of the team who was currently sitting close to Sasuke, averting her eyes from his narrowed gaze. Konoha huffed before he continued his pace around the training field. With his back finally turned to her, Sakura lifted her gaze to rest on his aggravated form. She had been the first to arrive at the training ground exactly at 8:30, hoping to make a strong impression of being the first to arrive. The second to arrive was Konoha, who came 15 minutes after her, and had immediately ran up to her and bid a loud greeting, much to her ire. Still trying to be polite, she bid him a good morning in return, which the boy took immediately as a sign to pester her for a date that resulted in him being smacked in response. He dejectedly got the message and seated himself on the ground, drawing patterns in the dirt. The final member of the team came exactly at 9, strolling into the training ground with his hands in his pockets. He silently greeted the other members with a head nod, ignoring the shout of his name by Sakura, and had seated himself on the ground like Konoha, but crossed his legs, closed his eyes, and promptly kept silent. Sakura had immediately seated herself beside Sasuke and began to pester him for dates, and when he didn't respond, she tried to just talk to him. When he still didn't respond, she gave up and just sat there quietly, utterly mesmerized by his cool attitude. The trio sat in quiet silence, with one member grumbling, the other fawning, and the other meditating as the time went by. 10 minutes. 30 minutes. 1 hour. 2. Okay, where the hell is this guy? It was the voice of Konoha who broke the silence. Not one for patience, he felt his hackles rise. His day started when he regrettably woke up extra early this morning, as he was not a morning person. He did his daily hygiene ritual of showering and brushing his teeth, ate breakfast and scampered here, hoping to show seriousness in being early, as the last meeting between him and the lazy Jonin had not gone so well. He was utterly surprised when the Jonin had showed up at the Sarutobi compound last night asking for him. When they had met, he had first apologized, which shocked him, for failing them, and told him to meet at Training Ground 7 at 9 sharp. But this kind of tardiness was downright ridiculous. He was a whole 2 hours late. Did this guy not know what it meant to be on time? I mean, who the hell tells someone to meet someplace at 9, and then show up at noon? Sakura had to agree with the loud Sarutobi, as she was feeling the effects of coming here early. She had to blink back sleep and routinely keep staring at the still silent Sasuke to occupy her thoughts. I bet this bastard forgot about us, he shouted. Sakura winced at his loud voice, and she growled at him, brandishing her fist threateningly. Konoha shut it. You're too loud, you idiot. The boy in return grinned sheepishly at her, scratching his nose in that nervous gesture of his. Ha, sorry, Sakura-chan. But you have to agree this is ridiculous, he finished nervously. The pink-haired kunoichi rolled her eyes before she nodded in agreement. Yeah, what was the point of telling us to come early if he wasn't even going to show up on time? She turned to the meditating Sasuke. Right, Sasuke-kun? Both members were surprised when Uchiha finally spoke since arriving. You shouldn't be surprised. He was 3 hours late yesterday. He didn't even open his eyes. Sakura pouted at him before her eyes brightened and she tried her luck again. Say, Sasuke-kun, after the test you want to get something too. No. Sakura dropped her head in frustration. Why does he always reject me? I know I'm not ugly, so why is it he never notices me? Konohamaru tried to muffle his humor by holding his hand over his mouth, but the sound of his laughter rang out in the training field. It was hilarious to see her still try after so many years of the same answer. Some people just couldn't take rejection. It was in his final year of the academy that he began to have a slight crush for Sakura. He had tried once in a while to ask her out, but it would seem that she was dead set on having tall, dark, and brooding. He never saw the fist coming that put his face into the dirt. Sputtering and coughing out dirt, he pulled his face out of the ground before he glared up at her. What the hell was that for? Sakura dusted her hands off before she glared down at him. That's for laughing, you jerk. Konohamaru was affronted. So, why the hell did you have to hit me for? Sakura sputtered in response, not wanting to lose an argument to Konohamaru, especially in front of Sasuke, before she racked her brain for the best answer. Because it's rude to laugh at a woman trying to win love. She promptly turned her nose up at him and crossed her arms. He stared dumbly at her for a few seconds. What? So that gives you an excuse to hit me? She stood on her feet, hands on her hips, as she glared down at him. You were being an idiot. Maybe it was frustration of their late sensei, or the annoyance of Sasuke not even sparing her glance, but feeling the need to vent her frustrations, she targeted the young Sarutobi. I'm tired of your arrogant attitude and letting all that hero worship go to your head. All throughout the academy you were nothing but loud and rude because of your heritage. I don't know why the whole village treats you as one, but being the grandson of the Hokage doesn't make you a hero. Even the normal blank Sasuke stared at her wide-eyed. Sure, Konohamaru was arrogant and loud most of the time, but didn't she know why the village idolized him? Konohamaru held his mouth open in disbelief as the girl started, but slowly began to lower his head as she went on. Why can't you be like Sasuke-kun? Shut up. His whispered words fell on deaf ears as she continued. You don't see him acting like you. Shut up, Sakura. Why can't you be modest like him and... Shut the fuck up. The sound of his voice echoed throughout the silent training ground. Birds nesting in the trees took to the sky in fright. Konohamaru held his head down not to expose his face as he felt a familiar burning sensation start to rise from his core. His hands formed into fists so tight that the now clawed fingernails cut into his skin. Sakura stood silent-mouthed in shock. Did Konohamaru just yell at her? Finally realizing the gravity of her words, she tried to usher an apology. Listen, Konohamaru, I didn't mean, her words in her throat as she realized the angry Jonin wasn't sitting. He had moved. But her eyes didn't even realize it. It took her mind a few seconds to process that he was standing directly in front of her. His breathing was ragged and his body was trembling all over as he fought the urge to wrap his clawed hands around her throat. His head was still bowed and his form still tense. Sasuke quickly stood from his seated position quickly and moved to the duo in case the angry Jinchuriki made a move to harm Sakura. His Sharingan analyzed the young Jonin as he began to speak. Don't speak to me like you know me, Sakura. With that he moved away from the frozen Jonin and marched himself into the forest at the other side of the training field. Waiting till he was deep into the forest, he went to a nearby tree and punched it, snarling all the while. Snap! The towering oak split in half and with a groan tumbled to the forest floor. Konohamaru stood there watching the tree as he closed his red glowing eyes and tried to calm his erratic breathing. Inhale. Exhale. He let out a calming breath as he finally felt the burning chakra in him recede. Feeling the strain of such an eternal battle, he dropped his back against the stump that remained of the great oak and mumbled under his breath. There was nothing but the sound of his own breathing before he felt the feeling of being watched. He sighed in frustration, no doubt expecting them to come running to investigate. Of course he would send them. He tiredly rubbed his temples as he waited for them to make their presence known. When no one appeared, he growled in annoyance. You can come out now. I know you're there. As soon as the words left his mouth, he found himself surrounded by a trio of white masks. He growled as they stood in silence, their features indistinguishable as they just stared at him, his face reflected in all three of their white masks. It was just a misunderstanding. A slip of control. Nothing to worry about. There was silence before the one in the middle spoke, the sound of his voice masked by the voice-altering software issued in all of their mask. Konohamaru couldn't hide the way the sound caused his hairs to raise. Recommendation: in control of emotion would be advised, young Sarutobi. The sound was sinister. We will be watching. With the warning delivered, the masked individuals disappeared right before his eyes. Gritting his teeth in frustration, he ignored the feeling of dread that welled up in him. He punched the ground in frustration. Control. That was he needed. He knocked his head in frustration of having lost control of his temper yet again. That was the second warning from them already. The first had been during his academy years when he almost spoke his secret in anger from being picked on by some older kids. He wasn't really liked because of his arrogant attitude, but he couldn't outright tell them that this was just a persona ordered for him to take up. Sometimes he cursed being what he was. The message was clear: control yourself or suffer the consequences. He already had 2 warnings. There wouldn't be a third. Sasuke glanced to the female member of the team to see her tentatively sit beside him. From the corner of his eye he saw her gaze at him, then down at her hands before she nervously bit her lip. Sasuke, I just want to say to that mouth of yours will get you in trouble. Her green eyes widened at the remark. His face wasn't looking at her, but staring at the forest that the container had run into. What? I don't understand. Sasuke cut off again. Why would you say that? He pointed to the forest in question before his cold eyes boring to hers. When you know what he is? He finished. Sakura was confused. What? I know he's the Hokage-sama's grandson. Everyone knows his heritage. I'm talking about what he contains. When he saw her confused eyes, he looked at her in disbelief. Thinking her to be joking, he came out and said it. Don't you know that he's a Jinchuriki? A Jin what? Sasuke was utterly at loss for words. Everyone in the village knew he was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, so why was it that the supposed smartest girl in the class didn't have a clue what he was saying? Don't you know about the Kyuubi attack? Why Konohamaru is called a hero? Do you know anything? I know about attack, Sasuke-kun, but what does that have to do with Konohamaru? Isn't he a hero because he's the Hokage's grandson? Sasuke honestly face-palmed before he gave her a dull look. His eyes narrowed at her generally confused face. She honestly didn't know. Cole's eyes momentarily widened before he quickly questioned her. Does any of our age group know what happened to the Kyuubi? Sakura gave him a strange look before she nervously bit her lip, gazing down at her conjoined hands. Not to be rude, Sasuke, but everyone knows that the Kyuubi was destroyed by the 4th Hokage? Sasuke stared dumbly at her for a few seconds, wondering just what the fuck was going on before realization came to him. Konohamaru's status was known to the adult population of the village, but none of the younger generation knew that Konohamaru was a Jinchuriki. What the hell? Now he remembered the strangeness of hearing history lessons of how the 4th defeated the Kyuubi by sacrificing his life and killing it. He had immediately known that was genuine BS, but never questioned why. He had figured it out for himself one day by making connections and having theories. Posing his question one day, he asked what Konohamaru was to his family, and it was all but confirmed when he saw them stay silent. After then he thought it was common knowledge that everyone knew, never questioning why the village idolized him. But racking his brain in thought, he realized that everyone was always careful with their words. If there was one thing that Sasuke learned from Itachi that he took to heart, was how to read people. The way they talked, looked, the clothes they wore, every characteristic about them. On his walks around the village he always heard people just call him hero. And nothing else. They would praise. Tell him he was brave and the same old, same old. But their smiles would never reach their eyes. The sincerity in their voices would be forced. Sometimes they would glance around in search of what? Being watched? Being monitored? It didn't make any sense. Even Konohamaru, for someone with such a big mouth, never mentioned anything of his status to anyone. Realization hit him. It was kept a secret to the younger generation. The older generation, the adults who knew, were not to mention anything of his real status. Under what penalty, though? Usually most secrets in the village were kept under the penalty of death. So were the civilians being threatened into idolizing him, but one whisper of the Kyuubi would have them executed. It doesn't make any sense? Saying his thoughts out loud finally caused Sakura to utter her confusion. What doesn't make any sense, Sasuke-kun? And what's a Jinriki, or whatever you had just said? And what does that have to do with Kono? Shut up. Sakura promptly closed her mouth as Sasuke made his face impassive and resumed his meditation. For now, he pushed his thoughts on Konohamaru to the back of his mind. He would try to solve this mystery at a later time. Sakura dejectedly kept her questions to herself before her gaze found the eyes of Konohamaru coming out of the forest. His eyes met hers and she quickly averted her gaze. She heard him scoff before he continued his pacing across the training ground, his heavy footsteps vibrating the ground. The only sound for a while was that of his feet stomping around the training field. And that was how Naruto found them when he appeared in a flicker of movement. "Good morning, idiot Genins." All eyes snapped to the sound of the voice, finding the sensei of Team 7 standing in front of them with his hands in his pockets, giving them that weird eye smile of his. "Morning. It's fucking noon, you idiot." Konohamaru's voice was just shy from a growl as he sneered at the still smiling Naruto. "And why the hell are you 3 hours late?" Naruto tilted his head back, staring up at the clouds as he absently scratched his chin. "It's noon already? Time sure does fly." His blue eye opened to regard the genin in question with a dull look. "I would call you an idiot, but that would be an insult to idiots everywhere." He ignored the way the genin bared his teeth. "As for me being late, well, I was going to leave home early, but you see, I have this little kitty cat at home and boy was she hungry. She wouldn't let me leave if I didn't feed her. So I had to satisfy her with my bottle." The 3 genin just stared. "But she wasn't satisfied with the one feeding I gave her. So I had to feed her again and again." His voice trailed off as a perverted giggle came from his masked mouth. An uncomfortable silence filled the training ground as Team 7 stared at their sensei in wonder. Sakura was confused as hell, not understanding his words. Was he trying to make a joke? Konohamaru slapped his hand to his face, finding a pervert bigger than the old man, and the last member was blushing up a storm, having understood the innuendo in his words. He knew for certain this man certainly did not own a cat. Naruto found it hilarious at the same time the reactions of the 2 boys, but from the reaction of the only female member of the team it would seem that she was a little slow. Give or take a few years before she understood his naughty jokes. Dismissing his thoughts, it was time for business. "Right. Here I have with me a timer." He pulled out a small brown clock and walked towards the 3 stumps in the training ground, placing the timer on the stump to the right. He turned back to the genin and held up 2 bells to their vision for them to see. "Your job is to get these bells from me any way you can before the timer runs out. I strongly advise you to come at me with the intent to kill. Before we start, any questions?" Sakura shyly raised her hand. Sensei, what kind of a test is this? And why are there only 2 bells?" "This, my dear pink-headed friend, is what I call the bell test. I can't tell you what kind of test it is, but I can tell you the rules in a moment. As for the bells, well, that's a secret." He finished with an eye smile. When no one looked like they wanted to ask any more questions, he nodded. He saw Sasuke finally stand to his feet and smirked as he saw him allow his Sharingan to activate. Turning to Konohamaru, he raised an eyebrow at his intents. He shifted his eye to Sakura, who looked nervously at him, then to her hands before she steeled her resolve and stared up at him defiantly. Good, at least she had some determination. He closed his eye, inwardly laughing before he made a seal. Everyone tensed as he brought his hands together, and in a flash of smoke a perfect replica of himself appeared. Shadow clone. They couldn't keep their mouths from opening as the original hopped onto the stump in the middle, making himself comfortable, and pulled out an orange book. "As I said before, you have to get those bells. If one of you manages to get the bells, you would be able to give a bell to one teammate, meaning both of you would pass and the other fails. If you manage to destroy the shadow clone, well, the person who destroys it passes, while the others immediately fail." He grinned at their shocked expressions. "If you fail to get the bells or destroy the shadow clone before time runs out, you all fail." He handed the bells to the clone as he waited for his information to sink in. The clone nodded at the original as it beckoned the genin, getting them to follow him. They walked for a while before they stood in the training ground clearing, 100 meters in each direction from standing directly in the center. On the edge of the clearing was forest all around. The minds of the genin were racing at the rules of the test as they moved into position to the shadow clone and watched with tense breaths for any moves. All the while their brains recounted the rules. Get the bells from him, and 2 of them would be able to pass, the other would fail. If one of them managed to destroy the shadow clone, then only one of them would pass and the others would automatically fail. Manage to not get the bells or destroy the shadow clone, then they would all fail. For bonus, they had to do this within a certain time limit. "You have 1 hour," the voice of Naruto's clone announced to them. On the other side of the training ground, the real Naruto started the clock. "You may begin." Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. Fire style, Burning Ash Jutsu. Sasuke and Konohamaru immediately blitzed through hand seals, releasing their respective attacks at the same time, causing the giant fireball to ignite the burning ash cloud into a giant explosion that rocked the training field. The shockwave of the explosion was so powerful that the two genin were thrown across the training field. Sakura, in her haste to make it to cover, was also thrown back by the force of the explosion and landed in some bushes. The real Naruto remained in his seated position on the stump, pulled his face out of his book as he saw in the distance a large black cloud of smoke rise in the air. He whistled in appreciation before he shoved his face back into his book. When the smoke of the explosion finally began to clear, a 10-meter crater was all that remained of the spot the shadow clone inhibited. The earth was blackened and charred around the crater from the intense heat of the attack. "Oh shit, that hurt." Konohamaru groaned as he pushed himself face first out of the dirt. A wheeze of pain escaped his mouth as he stood shakily to his feet. Beside him he heard a groan and saw Sasuke do the same. He bit back a laugh at seeing the entire front side of Sasuke covered in dirt and mud sticking to his hair. Eyeing his form, he saw that his condition was no different. Other than that, they were both relatively unharmed. Until a fist hit Konohamaru on the top of his head. Why the hell was everyone hitting him today? "Idiot, didn't you see I was attacking first?" A headbutt was his answer. "Didn't you see I was trying to provide cover, moron?" They both stood bumping heads, glaring at each other before a shrill whistle came from directly behind them. My, can't say that I'm not impressed by such an accidental collaboration attack." The arguing boys turned to see the shadow clone standing behind them, hands in his pockets, unharmed. Not even a speck of dirt on his form. Then he moved. The feeling of awe was replaced by pain as two fists planted in their stomachs launched them across the field. They impacted the ground, harshly stumbling before they came to a stop. Both boys wheezed, coughing and holding their stomachs, feeling like they were hit by a train. "Oh shit, that hurt." This time Sasuke had to agree. Despite the pain, he pushed himself to his feet, seeing the Jonin still in the same position as before. At least he was giving them a chance to recover. He quickly turned behind him to see Konohamaru standing on his feet. There was no way a group of genin could take on a S-ranked Jonin. They needed to work together. He glanced back at the Jonin, making sure he hadn't moved before he returned his eyes teammate. "Konohamaru, we need." He stopped dead as the Jonin was standing behind a confused Konohamaru. His speed was unreal. Seeing where his eyes were looking, Konohamaru palmed a kunai and spun on his heel, swiping at the Jonin, but found his arm held in an iron grip. Naruto increased his grip, causing the boy to wince, and dropped the kunai into his awaiting free hand. He twirled it in his finger as his lone eye turned to Sasuke. The Uchiha narrowed his eyes at the silent message. "What will you do, Sasuke?" Retreat would be what a normal ninja would do. But he was an Uchiha. Leaving a teammate behind would make him unworthy of wearing the fan on his back. His eyes met Konohamaru's and two nodded. Blitzing through hand seals, he inhaled as he built up chakra to the chakra points in his throat and endured the burn as he held it. Konohamaru ruthlessly pulled himself from the Jounin's grip, causing a sickening pop from his arm as he hit the dirt. The Jounin was utterly shocked at what the genin had just done before they narrowed at him. He threw the kunai that he held in his hand to force Sasuke to stop his jutsu and hopped backwards for cover. Despite the burn of his throat, he inwardly grinned. Forcing every ounce of chakra control he had, he utilized Kawarimi with the aerial kunai and appeared in between the two. It was truly satisfying to see the eye of the lazy Jounin widen in alarm. The Tomos in the young Uchiha's eyes slowed down time as he watched the flames spew out of his mouth. Fire style, fireball jutsu. Naruto swung his body upside down midair, unsheathing his short sword, with his body pointed downwards. He could feel the heat of the flames as he stabbed his sword downwards. The only thing Sasuke could do was widen his eyes as the blade rapidly extended, hitting the dirt, propelling Naruto upwards out of the path of the flames. Sasuke's mouth dropped open as he stopped his jutsu. Landing on his feet, ignoring the burning of his chakra points, he grabbed the downed Konohamaru, and the duo disappeared in a shunshin. Up in the canopy of the trees, Naruto let out the breath he had been holding. That was way too close. Showing great dexterity, he was perfectly balanced vertically, holding the handle of his sword, his feet sticking up in the air as he wiped his face with his free hand. Lowering himself on a nearby tree branch, and still holding the blade's handle, he cut off the flow of chakra he had sent through the sword. The blade slowly began to retract before it held its short sword length. Naruto flipped the sword, holding it upwards, staring at the Kusanagi blade with affection. "I fucking love this sword." Meanwhile, on the other side of the training ground, high up on a large branch, Both boys let out pained breaths. One from popping his arm out of its socket, the other from the intense burn of his chakra points. Konoha pushed himself up on his good arm, and grasped his dangling left. With a snarl and crack he pushed the arm back into its socket, biting back the scream wanting to leave his throat. Sasuke coughed roughly, spitting out smoke, holding his throat in pain. The feeling of his throat being on fire was unbearable. Thankfully the gambled worked and he had freed his teammate, but he was hoping to have caught the shadow clone with that move. He knew from their first meeting that the blade could extend, but who would have thought that the Jonin would use it to propel himself like that? Ingenious. Konoha rolled his arms a few times, hearing satisfying cracks before he rummaged through his utility pouch, finding a small bottle of water. He moved closer to Sasuke, offering the bottle that was taken from him in a flash. Sasuke downed the bottle like a person dehydrated and felt the cool liquid ease away the burning in his throat. Ushering his thanks to his teammate with a nod, he punched a hole into the tree they were residing in and stuffed the bottle inside. Littering in a training ground was rewarded with a steep fine. That guy is a beast. How are we supposed to get the bells? Sasuke nodded in frustration. He knew without a doubt there was no way the both of them would get the bells by themselves. Destroying the clone? He would have a better chance of asking Itachi to kill himself. They needed the whole team. They needed Sakura. At least she would be good enough to provide a distraction. But right now he had to analyze of what he knew of the Jonin. He was strong. One punch sent the both of them flying. He was extremely fast. Even to his Sharingan his reaction speed was unreal. And he was smart, no doubt, having carefully crafted this test. How many teams has he tested? How many of them had passed? Remembering his words on the academy roof, he guessed many had failed trying. Konoha mirrored his thoughts. It's designed to split us apart. He continued, ignoring how Sasuke widened his eyes at him. As he mentioned, if one of us destroyed the clone, that person would be able to pass, the other two would automatically fail. Predictably, you and I were aiming to destroy the clone. He crossed his arms, closing his eyes. If we wouldn't be able to destroy the clone, he would expect us to go after the bells next. He opened his eyes to see